Yeah.
Can you help with that? Sure. Okay. Yes. Yes, go ahead. I'm going to give you that. Okay. All right. All right, folks, I think it's time to go ahead and get started. I'd like to take your seats. All right, first of all, I want to say welcome to all of you. I'm very thankful that we can all be here together today. It's been a tough year. I know that everybody here knows that. I'm sure that I'm not saying profound when I mention that. But I'm very grateful that we can all be together here this morning. It's good to see the faces. It's a lot better to see them in person than to see them through the computer screen like you guys do. It's been one of the most challenging years that I've ever had through my 14 years in education. And I'm sure that for you guys, it's been like a 10-time challenge. It's taking tough courses, trying to apply for college, trying to make sure that you're ready for graduation, make sure that all of your courses are lined up, that your grades are taken care of. And I just want to say that each of you should be very proud of how much you've accomplished, not just this year, but in your 12 years with Monroe, 12 years with County, and your 4 years with Monroe. So take a deep breath today. Understand that what we're looking at is a 10-minute snippet of all of the hard work that you've put in over your years as a primary, elementary, middle, and high school student. Before we go any further, I just want to say thank you. Mr. Fairway, Ms. Alvin, Ms. Goodwin, Ms. Benedict, the voting staff for being here and for helping out with this program. It's been really good to be involved with the program. I want to thank our judges for being here, Ms. Dexter, Mr. Virgil, and Ms. Bond, for taking time out of your day to evaluate the students and give critical feedback to them. Just a couple of quick things, if you guys don't mind, I would like to ask if you have your children, go ahead and take them out and give them time. Let's try to avoid as many distractions as we can. I'm sure that your fellow students will really appreciate that. But again, I do want to emphasize how proud you should be of yourself and how proud I am of you today. All right. So without further ado, I think we will go ahead and we'll get started. Kind of how things are going to run. You guys can see the setup. Obviously, to the best that you can, to utilize the projector as well as talk to your judges as they're going through this today. That's all I can say. So thank you all for being here yet again. I'm looking forward to this. Feel free if you have any questions to jot them down, but I do ask that you hold off on those questions until our presenters are done with each of the presentations. There will be a time for question and answer at the end of the presentation. Okay? Anybody have any questions? Carol, would you like to say anything?
I'd like to say a couple of things. First of all, it's really great to see you guys. This is our first actual student presentation together in 4 years. So I think you guys are already done a great job. And also will say that, and maybe I said this on the class, but you guys have been an outstanding class throughout the entire program. So, I know it's been a struggle coming to this project. Work through this under a really tough condition. I've been amazed at what many of you are accomplishing with this, and really, I'm really proud of you as well. I'm really just amazed about it. Looking forward to hearing more about it, everything in the details today as we get into it.
All right, so everybody take a deep breath. It's going to be all right. You're going to do very well. I'm sure you will. And I'm going to go ahead at this time and hand the microphone over to NJoy. She's going to come up and give the first presentation today.
Hello, everyone.
All right, you're going to do very well. I'm sure you will. I'm going to go ahead at this time and hand the microphone over to
So this is my presentation, Cyber, Books, and Mail. Hello, everyone. My name is NJoy, and I am a senior at Monroe High School. I've been a part of the BRVGS program for 4 years, and I am doing my presentation mainly on cybersecurity. This is my presentation. So my motivation behind this project or this topic, I had taken a class in my junior year about cybersecurity fundamentals and recently focused on the topic. And I thought to myself, as the world is continuously changing, and as the digital environment and digital space continues to change, is cybersecurity keeping up with those changes? I remember when I interviewed my former professor, Dr. Jim Lansky. He always said that cybersecurity is definitely a now field. You see something on the news that day, you have to react to it that day. You have to come up with strategies that day for that specific event. So I thought to myself, this is definitely a field that should be taken seriously. As more of the world becomes more online and as digital literacy continues to grow. You have to react to it that day. So specifically, I want to justify my research towards online consumer protection. Consumer protection is the trust between a company and a consumer to trust someone's individual data towards that company for the company to use. So this specifically interested me because we see often in the news about data breaches where someone's individual data is breached by a company and that trust is broken. So I thought to myself, what happens after the news stories end? What happens after the cameras turn off? How do these lives get affected by these data breaches? I thought also that it was a practical idea because cybersecurity, while being a small aspect of computer science, is still very diverse and possible research topic. So using this topic allowed me to narrow down my research a lot. And I thought that this was a topic that would be easier to go around researching because there's many case studies. So my thesis question was how is computer security changing the digital landscape? And what impact does this have on the average consumer? I wanted to apply SCCT theory to data breaches and how companies handle them. So SCCT theory stands for situational crisis communication theory, and it is specifically the way that a company reacts to negative press and how they go about fixing their consumer trust. So there's 3 strategies that a company can use. They can deny, they can diminish, and rebuild. So the deny strategy is when a company outright refuses to acknowledge or outright denies that a data breach has occurred. They do this in order to keep their stakeholder base, but in the process they also isolate the consumer base. They could also diminish the stress. They could also diminish the negative stress in the way that they make the situation look much less worse than it actually is. And probably the most common one is the rebuilding strategy, where the company acknowledges it and they have transparency with people, and in the process they rebuild that trust between the stakeholder base and the consumer. So I want to apply this theory to how companies handle data breaches by using specific case studies. So this is a diagram that I created for my research paper. I specifically compared the Equifax breach and the TJX breach. Equifax is a tax company, while TJX is a series of commercial stores, you might know them as TJ Maxx or Marshalls. And I wanted to compare how exactly they use the SCCP theory and SCCP strategies and what is the result of it. So as you can see, Equifax implies a deny strategy, which is the definitely a review strategy, and as a result, because they couldn't have a secure control over their knowledge, they lost around $700 million. Meanwhile, TJX had a combination of the diminish and rebuild strategy, and they lost only like $11 million. So there were four main points that I discovered throughout the research in this application. First, companies' first reaction and past reactions that we have seen is to avoid responsibility at all costs. By avoiding responsibility, they tend to try to hold on to their stakeholder base, but they also isolate their consumer base. There's also currently a illusion of transparency that uses a strategy nowadays. The SCCP theory could be applied more to tax strategies, but nowadays companies are finding a way to have this transparency to their advantage. They have transparency with the consumer, but they also don't tend to let people know about the workings behind the scenes. And this illusion of transparency allows more people to stakeholder base and the consumer base. Also, there is a growing public responsibility for business strategies. Individuals now with increased digital literacy rates, there's a increasing pressure for specific individuals to have their own reign over their own data. And while this is a good idea, and while it is an outcome of increased digital literacy, it also means that companies have more leeway in what they can use as paper when they use a third party. Because they might say something like, oh, you should have protected your data more, it's not our responsibility to do it, I can't. One of the major things that comes out of my research is the importance of public education on consumer protection. If the public has a better idea of how the data is being used, and the public has a better idea of who they should give their data to, then this would allow these companies to have less leeway in how they react to data breaches and how they react to their data of their individual users. So in terms of my research, I attended the Carrie's Leadership Summit, which was a Zoom meeting that occurred from September to December, and it was something that I was very interested in because this whole time when I was doing my research, I was thinking, what may cause the leaders in these companies to take the decisions that they did? And this entire time I was looking from the mind of a consumer, from the mind of an average consumer, thinking, why don't they just have transparency with everyone? Why do they avoid what they do? And I had to think to myself, I'm not thinking from the mind of a leader. I'm not thinking from the mind of the upper management and why they make the decisions that they did. So this leadership summit helped me look outside of the realm of an average consumer and more into the lives of upper management, of the CEO, and the CEO. Included in this book, Leadership and Self-Deception by AOrange. This book specifically references getting out of the box that you're in, getting out of the perspective that you're in. So reading this book and helping me understand this outside perspectives helped me better realize the decisions that these leaders make in these companies for the way that they go about handling public relations, the way they go about handling these data breaches. By getting out of the box as an average consumer, I was able to think from the mind and the perspective of other management and from the mind and perspective of those who have to make these stuff work. In terms of my community service, during COVID-19, I definitely think that it was much harder to find community service in the area. I was able to get volunteering hours from BRVGS Seniors, which is located on Stanford Main Street. And I am such a lucky kind. As a third country, I could never really know what I was going to do every day. Every day would be a different thing, and I would have to learn something new about keeping a business every single day. It was definitely something that I was learning to love. having that constant change is something that I look forward to at a time where every single day is expected. It also taught me the importance of communication within a company and within a business, you know? Because having that communication, without it, maybe someone won't get their food. Maybe without the communication, someone will not be able to register every single food bank or they'll go hungry. So having that proper communication within a company and within its consumers is very important. Without it, here's a photo that is Miss Sandy to work there. She's the secretary, and she shows me how to make a box of food to deliver. Here's everyone that I work with. I usually work with them all on Saturdays for 1.5 hours. I learn my time there, and I just enjoy spending my time there with everybody. I'm still continuing to volunteer even after my project is over. So looking back and future advice for my legacy, I would definitely say one thing that I would have done differently is I would definitely have planned ahead. Because during COVID, there's so much that you might not know about. So many things might fall through. So planning ahead and having ideas of what to do next if something goes wrong, having something to fall back on is very important. And planning for that is definitely something I would have done. I would also say for future advice, try to get everything done as soon as you can, because it's very easy to sit back and it's very easy to neglect your project until the very last day. But it's going to be something that takes a lot of stress and a lot of time. Try to get your internships done, try to get your projects done, and try to get hands and just focus a lot on your research paper and use of the resources that you have. You have plenty of amazing lectures, you have plenty of amazing resources, libraries, Google Scholar, that you can use in your presentation and research and research. And I would definitely say that's something that people should do. In terms of my legacy, I am planning on launching a webinar series on YouTube that goes over how to protect your data online, specifically targeted towards the elderly youth, the high-risk population for falling into phishing schemes and insurance scams. And if there was something I would specifically advise for upcoming speakers, I would say don't be afraid of getting it out. It's very easy to take a no. Failure is very easy to take a no as you should not follow this path. But don't see it as something that's fair, see it as a stepping stone to success. Every no that you get from a volunteer organization you reach out to, every no that you get from a teacher, doesn't mean that that's not a path you can follow. It means that you just have to adapt and overcome it. So in conclusion, I found that this project is very significant to me. It taught me the importance as an individual consumer to realize the importance of my own data and the importance that my data has in the company. It also taught me the need and the necessity to protect my data and to keep a better watch over what exactly information I allow. If there is something other than the thing I said before, I would definitely plan ahead for any nodes or any issues within the plans that are in place. This project has definitely taught me the importance of two main skills: the importance of risk and the importance of learning to adapt. During COVID-19, it's very difficult you have to adapt to many different things. You have to adapt to an online format. You have to adapt to the opportunities being close. And having the determination to still succeed and having the determination to still go through a long-term project and while having to adapt to changes is definitely a skill that's not only needed outside of academics, not only needed in academia, but also for outside business, careers, and jobs, and maybe even just daily life. Future plans, I plan on going to the University of Virginia to study aerospace engineering. I hope to utilize what I've learned in my research and possibly focus a little bit on maybe take a minor in computer science or environmental sustainability. Thank you.
So we do have a few minutes. Anybody have any questions? It's a great time to go ahead and move those to the meeting.
So kind of one thing back on this section there, I'm kind of thinking about how you're going to get the word out on that series. You might want to connect with the county government as well, and maybe able to promote stuff like that for everything. But kind of looping it back to, like, kind of figure out the race. What do you think the biggest thing for your peers, you and your peers to know about security and data security? You know, in terms of that, what are the most important things to do like that?
I think definitely especially like for college courses, you want to look for scholarships. And a lot of times these scholarship companies are scams that just want the information to sell to other third parties. So one practice that I would do is if I'm signing up for, let's say I'm signing up for a website that offers scholarships, I would put the name of the website as my first name. It sounds a little crazy, but if I put the name of the website, let's say scholarships.com, Joy or something. If I get an email from another company, maybe like Scholarship 360, and if they address me at scholarship.com, that means that scholarship.com sold my information to scholarship.com, Joy or something. If I get an email from another company, maybe like Scholarship 360, and if they address me at scholarship.com, you'll see who exactly is selling your information to sell you that.
Yes, thanks for that. I kind of have the same kind of question. What would you recommend to the elderly, like how
You'll see who exactly is selling your information. Most of the time, your banks won't reach out to your email. So if you have a phone number for your bank, you can always call them to verify if you've gotten an email that's supposedly from your bank asking for more information. So most banks realize now that these phishing scams are going in their names, so they will usually not send out emails for the specific purpose. So yeah, reaching out and verifying your information from your bank or from your insurance company is very important.
thank you.
Yes, Quinn.
So you mentioned that you're going to do like a minor in cybersecurity or something along those lines. Is there a way that you intend to incorporate both computer science and aerospace engineering? And also, what made you choose aerospace engineering?
That's a good question. So I attended some summer academies that allowed me to study aerospace engineering more through the Space Grant Consortium.
Yeah, we'll take a minute, that's fine, my apologies. We can do that. This is still my first time.
Thanks for being here.
I think I've lost.
If you submitted it, you probably.
Julian. This is our first day here.
She's going to have to step out for part one presentation. She's got a meeting she's going to do. I think it'll be the next one.
Hi.
I hope Quinn's not. Was that? I hope Quinn's not upset. She won't have a 30. She'll be fine.
Hey, just remember, everything you say around this camera is recorded in my video.
Do you want me to go and turn up the master volume at all, or is everything okay?
No, I think we're good.
Okay.
Sarah's looking really good.
She said it's much better, whatever you're doing.
Yeah, I think I got it working now.
I like how it flashes.
Y'all need a minute more? Everybody good? Okay. All right, there you go.
Hello and good morning, everyone. My name is SEarle, and I am so excited to take you through my senior year. Like Mr. Patterson said, I struggled a lot this year with getting stuff accomplished and getting stuff finalized, so I'm very happy to finally have gotten to this point. My project inspiration starts here. In this photo, I'm about 7 or 9 years old, and I'm running my first and to date only women's 4-miler. But that's not really the important part. The important part is that I've been an athlete my entire life. So when I was trying to decide what to do my project on, it only made sense to me to have it somewhere in the sports and fitness realm. So I struggled a lot with trying to figure out a topic. So at one point in the summer, I just kind of took a break from thinking about verdict and started focusing on where I wanted to go to college next year and what I wanted to do with the next 4 years of my life. So while I was in the process of talking with my parents about what I wanted to do, thinking about how my friends decided to commit to college, I figured out what I wanted to do with verdict. I wanted to look into why high school students decide to play sports in college and how they get to that point. So I started thinking of internship ideas, and I knew I wanted to do it with an athletic trainer, because that's a career path I've always been really interested in, and I figured I could work it in working with college athletes. There's a major problem with this. High school and college sports didn't happen this fall with the pandemic, so no athletic trainer was going to take me in. So after a long time of trying to figure everything out, I ended up reaching out to a physical therapist here in Barboursville, Miss Polino at Phoenix Physical Therapy, and I'm so happy that I did. It was one of the best experiences of my life. With Miss Polino, I spent my first couple of weeks shadowing her and learning how she ran her clinic and getting to meet all the people that she worked with and the clients she worked with. After a while, I began working with the technician there, Austin, and with Austin, I would help clients get into the clinic, get them started with their exercises, I cleaned equipment, and then I would help them with their cool down, which was either icing or heating afterwards. And then near the end of my internship, I was even allowed to work one-on-one with clients, which was really cool that they trusted me enough and that I had learned enough to be able to do it all by myself. But unfortunately in December, I had to stop working there, and I was really sad about that. But that's when I started to focus on my research paper. So I knew I wanted to do why high school students decide to play in college, but I figured that was a very broad topic. So I started to think about how I made the decision that I wanted to be a college athlete, and I realized how much of a role my parents played in that decision. So then I began to wonder how much of a role other parents play in their students' decision. So I began to focus on this question of what parent characteristics help students be more successful in their athletics. And through research and a survey that I conducted with my fellow students here at William Monroe, I found that there were 2 characteristics that led to students being the most successful in their athletic career. And that was this type of characteristics about like unconditional love and support from their parents. No matter how they did in a game, win or loss, they always were there for them and made sure they had everything they need to play their sport. And then the second characteristic was that their parents were involved in their sport, whether it be they went to every game and were always there to cheer for them, to helping them train in the off season, or being a coach. So that was something I thought that was really cool, was
that it wasn't just the unconditional love and support, it was that a parent was involved in the students' athletics, they were more likely to want to continue playing. So after my paper, I began focusing on my community service. And this has been a little rough. I was really hoping to be able to do it in person, but with the pandemic and the school I was working at, Free Union Country School, with their rules, I have been doing a virtual community service project. And with Ms. Carbeck, who's the PE teacher here at Free Union, I've been working with her to create lesson plans on topics like nutrition, the importance of fitness, and about like the human body for students kindergarten through 5th grade. So not going too complicated, but keeping it easy to just teach them about how to stay healthy. And to make it easier for my teacher, I've created this website, which is a part of my legacy project, where I have a page that has all of the lesson plans that I've created on topics that I mentioned. And then I also have a library on there that has a lot of books involving the topics of my lesson plans, along with athletes and other sport figures to keep these kids interested in the healthy lifestyle and have people to look up to. And then that extra page has some extra activities that I didn't include in my lesson plans that teachers of all subjects can use to keep their students active in the classroom. The significance and the thing I really want to emphasize with my community service and legacy project is the importance of a healthy lifestyle. With technology getting bigger and it being easier to just sit around and do nothing and be entertained all day, I think it's really important to teach the next generation that you need to make conscious decisions about your diet and staying active. So I really wanted to emphasize teaching young children the importance of staying healthy and what you have to do in order to accomplish that. Trying to think of what I would do differently about this year was not difficult for me. Like Mr. Patterson said, I struggled a lot with getting stuff done and like securing my internship, so it made a lot of my work hard to do this past fall because it was all about my internship and I had nothing to talk about. So if I could go back and do this again, I would definitely try and work harder to getting my internship over the summer, or at least earlier in the fall than November, and just trying to make sure I stayed on top of my assignments better, because I let some of them like go by, and then I've been rushing to get everything done this spring, which has made for a very stressful couple months. One thing that I really learned through this project that I'm very thankful for is the career options that I have in the world of sports medicine. For a long time, I thought the only path for me was athletic training, and after this year, I realized athletic training might not be the best path for me. I like the idea of going into physical therapy better because I like the idea of helping people get back to healthy and get back to their normal lives rather than being with them at possibly the worst moment of their career when they get hurt and have to stop playing their sport for the season. So that's one thing I've learned, and with working with Ms. Polino at Phoenix, I was able to learn about like what classes I'll need to take, what programs I'll need to go through in order to get my degree in physical therapy, which was really awesome. Next year, I will be attending Bridgewater College to study health and exercise science and either earning my master's in athletic training and or my doctorate in physical therapy once I go to grad school. And in college, I will also be running cross country and track, which I'm super excited to be able to continue my athletic career in college. I want to thank you all for being here today. I want to thank my classmates for always being here to support me through presentations and through classwork. I want to thank all of my teachers for always believing in me and never giving up on me and pushing me to work hard, and for everyone else being here today to listen to me talk. And thank you so much, and at this time I will take questions.
Anybody have any questions?
I have a question. So you created your website. Who did you create that for, and how do you think we're going to use that?
So I specifically created it for Ms. Carbeck at Reunion, but I do plan on, once I like finalize everything, like possibly giving it to other Greene County teachers so that they can have these resources as well.
That would be wonderful. I'm sure Mr. Kelly would like it too.
Yeah.
So you said you struggled with like get going. Like what advice would you have for kids coming into the program coming up that you know you guys all survived sophomore year? Like how do you get through that barrier? Like what helped you kind of get, like what advice would you give someone like if you get stuck, here are some following?
Yeah, absolutely. So the biggest problem for me was I got so stuck and I wanted to do an internship with an athletic trainer, and I stopped looking at any other possibilities. I got so focused in what I wanted to do that I was like, I don't need to think about anything else because this is what I want to do, and if I don't do this, then it won't be good. So my advice would be, don't get so focused in on one thing. Think of as many possibilities as you can, reach out to as many people as you can, and then kind of try and figure out what you want to do for the project, rather than figuring out what you want to do for the project and then getting stuck. Yes.
Sarah, in working with high school students for a long time, I've met a lot of kids who are not, who think of themselves as like, okay, I want to go to college or I want to go pro. I mean, I've had people sitting in my office who were like second string on the basketball team saying, yeah, I'm going to play for the NBA. Like, how do you think you could, like, what information do you think that high school students need to have to be more realistic about their chances for actually participating in sports at the college level?
I think what would be a good idea is just for either their parents or for their coaches to just like have that honest conversation, and like early on in their athletic career have that conversation with their parents. So if going professional is something that they want to do, letting their parents know that that's something they want to do so that they can figure out a plan to get them there. But if they're not willing to put in the work, then having that conversation and being like, I don't think that's in your cards, like maybe look for other options, or if that's something you really want to do, this is what we need to do to get you there, and make sure that they're willing to do that. Yes?
So this year has been a challenge for everybody, but health and wellness, how would you, after going through this, your project as well as this school year, would you like to see schools look different in regards to providing opportunities for students to have more health and wellness instead of, say, traditionally sitting behind a desk for 6 hours of a school day?
Yeah, so on my extras page of my website, I have a bunch of like activities that like any teacher can do to like keep their kids active. Last year, me and Quinn, we did a project on physical active learning. So like just creating games for students to move around. So I think that would be the important part, is just like trying to figure out a way to teach your class and get your students to retain the information while getting them to move around, be active, and make it more fun and entertaining in like a game-like situation rather than lecture-based.
Mr. Patterson, are we allowed to say a comment?
Sure. Absolutely.
Sarah, I just wanted to say that I thought something that was really neat about your project is that you said you wanted to go into athletic training. You went in wanting to go into athletic training as a career path, but then through your work with physical therapy, you found that like you wanted to be with people healing instead of telling them like the worst part of their career is happening. I thought that was really unique, and I'm really glad that you got to have that like experience.
Thank you.
Anybody else? Very much, Sarah. Nice job.
And maybe I misspoke earlier when I said Sarah struggled, it really wasn't her fault. I don't want to give it away, but she was the one causing the problem, obviously. She's actually persevered very well through this, and I know that it was a major concern of hers early on, so I'm very proud of how she has come through and really put together an excellent project this year, so thank you, Sarah. All right, we'll give the judges a few moments to gather their thoughts and mark down on their rubrics what they'd like to do. At this time, Quinn, if you'd like to come forward and just get the computer ready with your account, we can have that ready to roll. And I hope that Quinn's not going to be upset, but Mrs. Fox does have a prior engagement. She's going to step out for a few minutes. She would hope she's going to be back.
Offended.
All right.
Okay, well, these aren't real pockets. I don't have any.
Just got a waistband.
Oh, can you put it on your belt? Yeah. I don't know if you want more to. And your coat can go over it if you need it to.
Run the wire right. Nice to know.
All my years of theater, I had one singular theater. I said one, my one singular year of theater. I
did theater. I was gonna see if I could get in it. She didn't. I know, I think so too. 4 years.
It's one of the ones that I keep in the classroom. It's Sally. Nikki's over there right now. She was just checking out the live stream. Once she turns it on, the audio is just a high-pitched squeal.
Have her fast forward. We had an issue earlier.
Okay.
If you go later, like current, it should
Right.
be fine.
Okay. All right.
I'm sorry. That's a Barbie's computer. She must be about to be on her.
Yeah, that's why I was saying.
Or actually, I know you on Sarah's. Maybe it's on Sarah's account. Maybe yours. She says.
I like smiling though. It comforts me.
trying to like make my face look like I'm not doing up a lot of work.
Trips and walks.
First reaction and tactic.
Hey, Mr. Patterson.
Yes.
Can you let her know the recording here, the audio is perfect. So the YouTube one is that high-pitched squeal,
Yes.
but the recording.
Right. She said that the current one sounds fine though.
Okay, but like, yeah, everybody, because there'll be two copies. There's like the YouTube one,
Okay.
and then I'm also recording it separately with the microphone.
Okay. So what I'll do is I'll shoot her the email with the link. Is it the same link for the whole thing on the Hangouts?
Yes, but they won't be able to rewind on that.
Okay.
So like the first one, I have the recording already, and I just checked it, and the audio is good on that
Okay.
one. It's just on the YouTube one, it's going to be that weird high-pitched squeal.
Okay. All right. Ready to go? Okay. All right. I have you. Don't worry. I'll get you.
All right, so for our third presentation today, we're going to have Ms. QHenkel. She's going to be presenting on disparities faced within the health system. I've been fortunate enough to have Quinn, and this is not obviously a knock on anybody who wasn't in the school building, but I've been fortunate enough to have Quinn visit me at least 2 days a week for the most part throughout the year when she's been able to during 7th period. So we have been able to kind of communicate back and forth, but it's good to see her here, and I'm happy to see what she's going to be able to present to us. So let's go ahead and give her a round of applause, and we'll get going.
Good morning, everyone. My name is QHenkel, and I'm a senior at William Monroe High School as well. I'm a 4-year student of BRVGS as well. So, my project is on disparities faced by Black individuals in the health system and what's being done to change them. Now, before I can get into my research and explaining my entire project, there are 3 key terms that I need to define. The first being disparities. These are the social influences on one's living environment which impact one's health and quality of life. Now, these include a number of things. There are some main ones though. Socioeconomic level, education level, gender, race, ethnicity. All of these have impacts on people's health and their quality of life. The next 2 are equality and equity. Equality is giving everybody the exact same thing, while equity is giving everybody what they need to reach a certain outcome. Now, you can see in my little graphic here, equality, there's the 2 individuals, and they're given the same ladder, but one of them is shorter than the other, so he's not able to reach the tree. Now, in the equity situation, the shorter one is given a taller ladder, and they're both able to pick the tree, so they're both able to reach the same outcome. Now, believe it or not, I actually began my project in March 2020. This is a picture of me at the Virginia Department of Health.
And I went in to fill out some paperwork to start my internship under Miss Marsha Hornberger, who was the epidemiologist at the time. And as you can see, I'm not wearing a mask. This was before the COVID shutdown. So obviously the COVID shutdown kind of stopped all progress I had, and so I stopped working on my internship and just kind of was like, okay, I'm gonna focus on my summer classes now. Now, I have 3 big things that led me to my research topic. The first being one of my summer classes, HLT 110, or Introductions to Community and Personal Health. Now, this is like any health class you've ever taken in your life, except it's more in-depth and on a college level. One of the things we discussed were disparities. Specifically, we talked about how Black communities face higher levels of certain illnesses and diseases, mainly respiratory illnesses such as asthma and cardiovascular diseases such as heart failure. Now, these are not genetic components to things, such as like Jewish communities having higher rates of Tay-Sachs. These are specifically because they have lesser health interactions, and they aren't able to get as best care. The next thing that influenced my project were the Black Lives Matter protests of this summer after George Floyd's death. Now, throughout these protests, terms were thrown out all over the place. Systemic oppression, systemic racism, oppression of individuals based on their race and stuff like that. And on the surface, I was like, oh yeah, like I know what these terms mean. And then I looked into it more and I was like, I really have no idea what any of this is or how any of these systems were built. And the third big influence was my internship. This is me just sitting on my computer. That's how I conducted my internship. I did my internship at the Virginia Department of Health, but I switched my mentors again because Ms. Marsha Hornberger had left I think she left in March. I didn't hear back from her, so July I reached back out to the health department, and I got into contact with Ms. Takindra Westbrook, who was the interim epidemiologist at the time. Now, originally my project was going to be on epidemiology, hence why I reached out to 2 of the epidemiologists at the health department. But later I found out Ms. Takindra Westbrook, she serves on the Health Equity Committee at the health department. And this is how I got into my health equity topic. Now, I served on their Health Equity Committee. I've been attending their meetings since mid-September, pretty consistently. And I am the least qualified person to be there. All of these other people have their masters in public health. They've got these big degrees, and I'm a high school student sitting on these boards. So I kind of provided this community view of people who weren't in the system and seeing what I could contribute. Now, these health equity committee meetings are internal, and they're focused on the Virginia Department of Health and how they're approaching equitable practice for individuals in their communities. Believe it or not, I switched my mentor for a second time. Switched to my 3rd mentor, I'll say that. And because Ms. Takindra Westbrook moved health districts. So for the remainder of my internship, I served under Ms. Sally Goodquist. She's the Regional Tobacco Coordinator and also serves on the Health Equity Committee. So with my internship, most of it was attending these meetings, and then I would follow up after with either Ms. Westbrook or Ms. Goodquist, and we would discuss the concepts and the content talked about in the meetings. Because some of it was well over my head, and I really had no idea what was going on for the first couple meetings. So these 3 things, my summer class, the Black Lives Matter protests, and my internship led me to my research questions. And these are, what disparities impact individuals the greatest, and what systems are most effective in eradicating these effects? First, I need to kind of discuss the fact that
disparities are formed off of racism and racist systems. So back in like colonial times, there became this big divide because there were a lot more white people in power than black people. And a lot more white people owned more land, had more money, and had a lot more than most of the black population. And then we also had Europeans who thought that they were superior. And so we gave birth to white supremacy, which then made us believe, oh, we're better. We're better. So we're going to have better systems, we're going to have better health care, and you guys aren't going to have as best. And this really happened during the civil rights movement. As we know, we had the separate but equal movement, but obviously equal was not actually equal. They had lesser things. It was, you know, worse water fountains, worse education, worse resources that they were allocated. So this led to a lot of disparities in the black community. One of the things that they suffer highly from, they're 20% more likely to suffer from mental illnesses, specifically more severe mental illnesses like PTSD, depression, and anxiety. They also they're also 46 to 76% more likely to suffer from some severe form of cardiovascular disease. Now, these numbers range depending on the studies you look at, but the disparities also cause high levels of stress, and stress affects the body. An allostatic load really, really, really can damage your body, especially when it's continual and like continuous stress really affects you and can damage your body, essentially. So with all of this considered and looking at all of the programs, I found out there is no disparity that impacts individuals greater than others, because an individual with one disparity is more likely to suffer from another. So if somebody has a low education level, they likely aren't able to get a job, which means they have a lower socioeconomic level, which means they've got these high levels of stress. So there is no disparity that can impact individuals more than others, because they often create a very negative ripple effect. And on the systems that are most effective in eradicating these effects, there isn't one. There is no significant data yet out there, because health equity is not a practice that's been around for long enough to create this significant data. So the short answer to both my questions is there isn't one. So what did I do for my community service? I did my community service at Church of Our Savior's Food Pantry under Miss Sylvia Sundin. You may ask why there's toilet paper in the fridge. It's because we ran out of room on the shelf and the fridge was broken. So use all the space we've got. This community service relates directly to my project because it was approaching disparities from a different approach, essentially. So during my community service, which I'm still continuing to volunteer at the food pantry, we distributed food and restocked the shelves. During these food distribution days, we would essentially pick various cans, pick various meats out of the fridge. Sometimes we had like diapers and stuff that we could give to kids, and we'd make these big boxes and we'd bring them out to the cars. And obviously the amount of food and resources received by individuals was affected by the number of individuals in their family. This is a picture of me and Miss Sylvia and then another one of the volunteers after a restock. For our restocks, we went to the Blue Ridge Area Food Pantry, or Food Bank, which is just in downtown Charlottesville, and we would pick up these big orders of food to then bring back to our own food pantry and restock the shelves. For my legacy project, I'm actually working right now with the food pantry to create a shopping list and a more effective distribution system. So individuals who come to the food pantry can choose what food they're given and choose what resources they need. So if they need diapers, they can just check it off the list and then write in the size. Or if they are Muslim and want a specific type of meat, like they don't want pork, so we'll get them chicken instead. So these are important things to consider in providing equity for these individuals. So looking back on this project, it's been a bit of a roller coaster. I switched my mentors multiple times, and it's kind of been a mess. I kind of procrastinated, kind of took my time with things, and probably wouldn't have done that if I had started earlier. But I think looking back at it, it made me grow a lot as a person because it made me more flexible and made me have to think outside of the box, especially because COVID-19, so I couldn't be in person doing things for a lot of my internships, so I had to figure out how to do that online and stuff like that. My advice for future BRVGS students is you're going to procrastinate. It's inevitable. It's your senior year. You don't want to do anything. But take at least 20 minutes out of every week to just look and think about your project. Even this little bit of time every week, you'll make so much more progress than if you're trying to do, weeks worth of work in a day. So you're going to procrastinate, but make sure you're able to make your project something you're proud of. So my future plans, I plan to attend the University of Michigan at the School of Kinesiology to study movement science. And that's me and my dad on campus from this summer. So, thank you.
As always, we have some time for questions.
I forgot how to articulate it.
Maybe somebody can step up from the desk.
But I have a question. So if let's just say you're queen for a day, and you can completely go into the American medical system and change one thing that you think would possibly influence equity and equitable access, what would that be?
Oh, there is a lot of things that I would change within the systems, but if there was kind of one big thing I would change is I would kind of change our education system in that a lot of people don't know about some of the resources that they have available. So the education on that, like we have a free clinic in Greene County. How many people know that? Not many people know that. So if you're at a certain level of income, you still can qualify for these free clinics and you can get free care, but a lot of people don't know that because they don't know the resources are out there.
Can't ask the question until the M goes away. So, in your conversations or in your workings with the health department then, did the conversations about inequities with COVID come up a lot?
Yeah, actually. So most recently, our conversation about COVID inequities and stuff, we were talking about vaccine distribution and how we're best going to provide an equitable distribution of the vaccines. And there were a number of things to consider, like one of those being transportation. How are people going to get from their homes to these vaccine distribution centers? And, it's kind of one of those things that throughout this, we've talked about food distribution, talked about transportation, talking about how are we getting these people the medical help that they need and stuff like that. So those are very interesting conversations that I've had.
Yep. Thank you.
All right, so you said disparities and ripple effects. Which one do you think is the, most overarching disparity that we could handle locally to try to have an impact?
So obviously we're in a public school system, so every child, our school system and stuff like that, everybody gets very specific resources and stuff like that. But I think one of the things that we can look at, on an education level still, is talking about these things, talking about disparities, talking about racism and systemic oppression, and not just covering the surface and saying oh, this was a bad thing we did, and it's not happening anymore. It is happening still, and it's really affecting people, and we can't just continue to gloss over it the way that we have been in our system. I think it's something that if we start to target more in schools and we start to target people like right at a young age, then we can start making changes on bigger levels for these people. And I say these people, but I'm talking about people that are faced with disparities, because obviously a lot of people have white privilege and don't really face many disparities in their life. Yeah.
So I really loved the graphic you had with the apple trees. I thought that was very powerful because of the simplicity of it and just like, wow, the tree's bending my way, you know. Like,
Yeah.
And so I think that was awesome. But my question has to do with, I love that you're helping people shop and have a choice and empowering them, which is amazing. Can you tell us a little bit more about how you're providing that? Like, is it on a paper or is it through a form or what?
Yeah, so a lot of the people I volunteer with, they're kind of more elderly. So trying to do anything electronically is a little difficult because they aren't the most electronically literate. So I'm trying to work right now with my mentor to make a paper form that will just kind of have the options for whatever we have in the food pantry that week. Because every now and again we get fresh produce, and it's really exciting when we get fresh produce because we're like, do you guys want potatoes? Do you guys want onions? Do you guys want apples? Because we have this fresh produce every now and again, and it's very rare. But it's just going to be like a simple kind of shopping list with just what we have in the food pantry. And if we don't have something, we'll just mark through it, and it'll be very, very simple. It'll be very, paper pencil, because a lot of the volunteers aren't very good with, oh, let's do a Google form, like, what are the options? And it'll be also more fast and more effective with the people that we're bringing the food out for.
Are they getting fresh produce, is a side question, from local farms? So why is the fresh produce such a novelty item for them?
So the fresh produce we have to buy, and the food bank, I think the budget's often only like $2,000, and the other issue is you never know how many people you're going to get in a week, so it's kind of hard to buy mass produce, and so and also there are other places, so Loaves and Fishes, which is another like food bank in the area, they give out like 50 pounds of food at a time because they just order these mass like loads of produce and everything. So a lot of people go to this like bigger food bank to get like 50 pounds of food all at once and like get fresh produce, and it's kind of hard for us because fresh produce can be expensive, especially when you're buying on a smaller scale for lesser people.
Anybody else? All right, let's go to another round of applause. Thank you, Brian. Thank you very much. Nice job. What'd you get on hook there?
Remind me of like the books like America's Got Talent.
This is like my, to be perfectly honest with you, I think hosting is the most nerve-wracking thing I've done all year long. Yeah. So yeah, this is not my typical thing. All right, so we do have a 15-minute break at this point. I would like to let Mr. Caraway make an announcement before you guys take off. I wanted to give you a chance to maybe use the restroom if you needed to. Give our judges a chance to get their thoughts together and maybe use it, take a break, use the restroom, whatever needs to be done. But Mr. Caraway would like to make a quick announcement before anybody takes off, if you don't mind.
Yeah, we actually have a special guest that we're working on getting in, who just wanted to pop in and say hello. So
Actually, let me put it up there.
Miss Alex is going to put that on the.
That'd be better over here.
Check. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Everybody just heard you check, so they know you're here, Jenna.
Good morning.
We're going to get you up on the screen in just a second here.
Great work, Quinn.
Except we don't have a video on you. We don't have visual on you.
It's a very cute profile picture, though.
There we go.
Oh, look at you!
Wow. How early in the morning is it for you?
It is 7 now.
Okay.
Oh my gosh.
Thanks for getting up early for us.
Of course.
Hang on just one second. We're going to get you going just one second here. So we've had 3 really good presentations so far. Quinn, did you see? Did you?
Killed it. Good job, girl.
Yeah, you came in on that one.
Oh, she dressed all pretty.
Yeah.
Like, I have no idea what you're seeing on your side of the screen.
I'm seeing Miss Ouden.
Okay.
So if you want Jonah to see you, you gotta stand in front of the
Oh, you're in front of the camera? Oh, there you go.
Which
The blue one.
This one?
Yeah.
Okay. Here, I'm gonna real quick. Just there we go.
Let me see you people.
All right.
Hi.
Getting everybody now.
Mr. Fox is here, Jonah.
Yeah.
What?
Mr. Fox right back there.
Fox is in the back.
Mr. Fox.
Mr. Fox is in the house.
Oh, you're all so blurry. I'm sure you're beautiful.
So, yeah, I'll just leave you kind of pointing towards everybody here for a second.
Oh
Yeah.
my.
Well, thanks for dropping in. We should have had you present like this. It's happened before.
How is everyone?
Speak up.
Yeah.
Good?
All right,
Mostly good?
What are you learning about sound reinforcement? How's that going?
Sound enforcement. Oh, learning so much. Everything is happening so fast. But right now we are studying a different console. So we just started on the API and we're working on our core technologies and lots of CT stuff. Electronics are very important, but it's a lot of fun.
Very cool. Very cool. Well, everybody misses you here, so I don't know if we're going to get you. Are we going to get you on the screen, Miss Alton? Yeah.
Oh, I'm coming back to graduation.
Oh, fantastic.
I'll see you all in June.
Yeah, what's the deal for you guys for graduation as far as what's that going to look like?
And we're doing it in person.
In person?
Yes.
There's the answer right there.
Okay. Yeah.
They're finding out
They were about
today
to
at
not
noon,
let
right?
me walk.
I don't know. I think they moved the meeting inside. Or
Oh,
on
yeah.
Zoom.
It's a Zoom.
It's a Zoom, there's no inside. No inside.
I was so excited for the grilled lunch, though.
They'll all
hot
get like
dogs?
4 tickets.
Yeah.
Be in the stadium.
I
Hi.
have to, like, take one grandparent.
There we go. We just got you up there. Yeah, you're pretty dressed up for 7 o'clock in the morning.
Guys, it's National Volunteer Week.
Look at her.
Reynolds just sent out the email.
Oh boy.
Sleep is a luxury. We just keep going.
Yeah. So what time do you usually have to be at class, Jen?
I usually have classes starting at 9, and but I like to be at the school before that, so I'm usually up at about the same time. So this wasn't too different.
Okay.
I moved my class to later today, so I could see you all.
Yeah. Well, you could have told everybody that you sacrificed and got up like super early for all of us here. Yeah. Yeah. There we go.
Yeah.
Okay. There we go. Yeah, just kind of giving you the pan again here. So, okay, Hannah Mac.
Guys, they were about to not let me walk for graduation because I can't make a meeting or something.
It's a Zoom
I
meeting.
can't make the required walking.
We got,
They're about to not let me walk.
oh, hang on. We gotta get you around this way. Hang on a second. He's out, and then we got that's Miss Dexter back there,
Hi, Jenna.
and Mr. Purcell. Yeah. So very cool to have you here. All right, we got to give these guys a break for a minute. So I'm gonna leave you on if anybody wants to talk, and you guys can come up and talk to the camera. And I've suggested a stand-up break for everybody except for Hannah Reese. That's
Well, Hannah
limping.
Reese can scooter around.
Yeah, we need you.
Where's you didn't bring your scooter.
Yes.
Elementary school got a scooter. Oh, yeah. And she went up. Where are you guys going?
Standing up.
All right, I think we're heading out for break. Thanks for getting up early, Jenna. And
Yeah, of course.
all right, we're still up for catching up tomorrow afternoon.
Good luck, everyone. Yeah, Mr. Garrett, I'll see you tomorrow.
Okay, yeah, I haven't actually seen you, I don't think yet. So, yeah, see you tomorrow.
Yeah.
All right, great. Thanks for stopping in.
Thank you.
Take care. That was cool. Thank you for making that work.
Yeah.
When you go. Doing well. Haven't seen you much at all. I'm doing good. How are you? Very well, thank you.
I was thinking about that. I was like, I haven't seen some of these people in the program.
Yeah.
Great. So I'm like, Mr. Fox Black.
Yeah, I get to see this.
I was gonna say,
On a regular basis.
I see you and Sarah. And Trevor now.
They're all asynchronous, so you can from anywhere, so he's doing that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can be in Florida.
Yeah.
Oh,
Well,
my God.
like I know a couple people who back on the
So crazy.
signed up to teach English in China. And
Oh, my
here.
God.
Good have to go.
Yeah, and that's, I mean, this is not, I mean, that's like 5 years ago. Those were not classes. So they had to get up like at 3 or 4 o'clock in the morning to be able to teach.
What's part of it?
That you can like have conversation with people in China and it be a normal conversation you're like teaching in class.
Yeah.
Mom, you're not letting us pick
That's how
up.
people felt when the phone came along, too. It's like, you know, wait till you look for 11, go around Friday.
Stuff like somebody across the country.
But it's funny, when I started this program, so, it was all supposed to be built on video conferencing, back in those days, video conferencing. You know, you had this huge TV thing in your class, and it was like, sort of work sometimes, mostly not work, and, you know, but that's all, you know.
This is my presentation.
We'll have life-size holograms in the room, so it just looks like that person's there. It's funny, I was down with my family this weekend, my dad, he's still working on himself, he's a doctor, he's still practicing. But it was funny, just the got me out and watching kids loving this thing, you know. He's getting phone calls, he's talking to them, and my wife said, that's like the era of Jetsons we're living in. He's like, well, they think about this back in the old Dick Tracy comics, you know.
It's like 2001, you know, everything's like now.
Yeah, but it's so hard to see.
And then I was like, oh, come on.
Huh?
Pfizer.
Yeah, okay.
And I'm on Pfizer right now.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
What are they gonna do like? Are they
You
gonna
go,
go
are you up to, I'm assuming you're not gonna have a checker.
Oh my gosh, you read my mind.
Well, I mean, making sure.
Like the Matrix?
No, absolutely. I don't think that you need to have to stand up.
I'm like, it just told me
I'll
on
just-
Thursday.
The first one's not the other.
Well, that's fine. I'll grab one of those up there and bring it down.
Yeah, I think he knows.
Yeah, we won't count.
I'm gonna ask you one question.
Yeah, you go ahead.
Okay, I'm counting one. I'm counting one.
I don't remember what it was, but I got a second one.
You ready?
Yes, I hope so.
Now, how are you feeling?
I'll make sure you get the hardest question.
Mr. Fox, like I'm ready to ask you some more
All right, then I'll hold my whole question for Briar,
Doesn't
Trevor.
that work just a little?
Yeah, they said that was good.
Yeah.
He deserves it, not me.
Which one?
Trevor.
Trevor?
I got you, Trevor. She's gonna ask you hard.
I said I need to ask a really hard question. She could,
I mean, not right now.
All right.
So can I start off my stand-up comedy routine?
I expect it.
Kennebec, you up next?
Yes, sir.
Alrighty. All right, I'll be right back.
I didn't think, well, I mean, if that would have been the case, I would catch it.
like, I mean, I've noticed how this I think that's because sometimes, you know, through all these other accounts, and says she has access to it, we have to work on it. But the problem becomes, and the thing about some photos, you might have to share to your account. And videos especially, if you haven't shared them as public, and you pull them up on her account, well, now whether the video. It's easier to do, especially if she doesn't, we don't have time to do that. But I mean, you gotta do that. Last year when COVID hit, we were, I'd already scheduled out 4 different times to go to that, because last year we were going to present in class. Each time they were doing a film, and then the next time they come back to do that chunk again, plus that song. And then that song, you know what I mean? So we got the final presentation. Obviously, you never got that.
I know, that's
But we didn't have that opportunity.
Yeah.
You live now.
Like a video. I know I'm trying to present like I'm going to present on the front end. You said I'm practicing. I think this is I haven't had that because I was into drama when I was in middle school. Middle school was really high school. I didn't have as much time to do it as high school went along, but I did a lot of different things. I don't know how it is now. 6th, 7th, and 8th grade. In 6th grade, you got to like go for the course and all these different things. In 7th and 8th grade, you got to It is? Okay, so 7th and 8th grade in those years, I did drama.
Yeah.
7th and 8th grade, I did drama. And then I also did band. I've done some band. Yeah. Well, indeed. Honestly, this is
I'm not happy. I want to be in your presentation and do this way. Like, when I was up there. Well, it, growing up in the middle of presentation, it may not be on my lap for every day.
I felt like having more of a friendly face and you're by your side. All right, we'll go ahead and get started here in just a minute.
Yeah.
Yeah, we'll take care of that. We missed you. I don't get to see any of your festivals. Yes. Well, normally the presentation.
Thank you.
I'm right there. Good. You can say your questions of doing them.
Yep.
Y'all ready to roll? We'll get
All
started.
right, stay hydrated.
And these guys.
Yeah, Mike, these are really good.
I do like the things that I can go on.
I think she would have been fine if she didn't have
They
anxiety.
need to space in the presentation. It's like,
All right, folks, if we can find our way back to our seats, I think we're going to get started in the second set of presentations here. So grab a snack, grab a drink if you need it. Let's go ahead and get rolling here.
You want anything?
I'm good.
I saw the changing of the guards in Arlington. Yeah, they like the.
Everybody stare at Dexter. You have to scowl under your mask.
It's very hot.
You and Patterson match.
You're what?
We planned that.
The red and black.
I'm the co-host of the show.
I'm just giving this to you and let you go.
I asked, can I do my stand-up comedy routine before we do that?
Turn the heat down.
I don't know how to do that. I agree with you, but I don't know how to do that.
They have to call over maintenance.
Yeah, they were also, the heat's blowing right down on them.
I agree. It's
No,
kind of,
it's toasty in
I
here.
think we don't have any stage lights on. All right. All right, so we'll go ahead and get started with our 10:15 presentation. Ms. HMcInturff is going to be presenting. Go ahead and give her a round of applause real quick. You guys like to do that. Excellent, excellent. So Hannah has been with me a lot this year as well in the classroom, which has been excellent. I know that she has grown a lot as a student throughout her research and throughout her internship, and it's really exciting to see her up here today. She's going to be speaking on home life and juvenile justice, or juvenile crime, and I'll go ahead and hand things over to her so we can get started. So thank you, Hannah. All right, cool.
The home life and juvenile crime. 85% of juveniles that are in detention facilities come from fatherless homes. 70% of high school dropouts come from fatherless homes. Children from fatherless homes are more likely to have anxiety and attempt suicide. Now, these statistics didn't really mean much to me a few years ago because I didn't come from one, and the people I knew that did didn't really talk about it a lot. But in my first few years of high school, I worked with a group called YDC, which is the Youth Developmental Center, which is an after-school program for kids in middle school and for kids in elementary school, and they provide activities and tutoring for these kids in underprivileged areas of the community and that have harsh home lives. And I remember on one of my very first times working with YDC, I was working with this little boy, he was in middle school, and I was helping with his homework, and he started talking to me about his home life. And he wasn't trying to garner sympathy or anything, but he was just nonchalantly talking about his family, his parents, what was going on, and it really broke my heart, the violence that he was exposed to, the instability, how his parents weren't really there for him. And I remember I went home that night, and I told my dad about what this boy had told me, and I actually cried because I was so upset. And it really, I knew that a lot of people that end up going into the justice system and going to prison, they come from homes similar to this little boy. And it seems so unfair to me. Why is it just because this kid was born into the wrong family that his whole life is almost doomed? He's such a sweet little kid, and I just got lucky. I was born with two parents, but I mean, what did I do to deserve it? And so this got me thinking about what is this justice system doing for these kids? Like, what can we do to not have them doomed just because they drew the short straw in life? And so I learned about this thing called diversion, which is in the juvenile justice system. And diversion is really anything that's going to keep something off of your permanent record. It can be community service, it can be writing an essay on why speeding is bad. And it was explained to me kind of like a highway. So the highway represents this system. The system represents any sort of misdemeanor or felony that you can get on your permanent record. And having a misdemeanor or a felony is going to keep you from getting into college, getting a certain job. A felony will stop you from voting. It can affect your chances of getting rent. So pretty much the more you get in the system, the more stuff you accumulate on your record, the harder it is to change life. The harder it is to get back on the straight and narrow path. And so diversion works as exit systems onto this highway. And there's a lot of exits at the beginning. There's a lot of things these kids can do, community service or programs, classes they can take. But as you get further into it, it's harder and harder to get out and it's harder to get into the life, on a good life. And that's why so many kids in the juvenile justice system, when they turn 18, they just graduate to the adult justice system and they end up just going to jail. And so in my research, my burning question was all about what are the factors that are going to contribute to diversion success in these kids, that we can get them back onto a good life and not have them doomed from their childhood. And so the three main things I focused on are parental involvement, substance abuse, and mental illness. What I found in parental involvement, just like the statistic I opened up with, 85% of juveniles in the detention facilities come from fatherless homes. Now, ignoring the specificity of the father, coming from a single-parent household reduces the income going to that kid. So it's reducing the amount of resources that that kid has, the amount of money to be able to spend on food or clothes that they need. It also limits the amount of time that parent can spend with that kid. So they aren't going to be able there to watch the kid and make sure they're making right decisions, to discipline them when necessary, and to teach them right and wrong. So a lot of the times that kids turn to juvenile crime from these households is due to the fact that they're looking for a way to find these resources. They're stealing because they feel like they need it, because they don't have enough money, or because they don't have a parent that's going to discipline them and keep them out of these areas. The second is mental illness, and 65 to 75% of juvenile offenders have a mental illness. And diversion is not going to really help unless that mental illness is treated, because that mental illness is a contributing factor to why they're committing these crimes. So diversion, if it needs to be successful, and luckily new diversion practices do take on a more therapeutic and rehabilitative role. So you need to come to that crux of that problem and treat that mental illness so that kid is not falling into the same patterns after they are finished with their diversion. Now for substance abuse or substance affiliation, because not all the time that kids are taken into jails because they're using drugs, but it'll also be they're dealing drugs. And a lot of the times when they're using it is because they come from really harsh backgrounds, home lives, communities, and they're using that as sort of an escape. Another reason is they might be dealing because they need the money, and so that's how they're trying to make their money. And then the third reason is a lot of drug offenses are affiliated with gangs. And so these kids feel like they need to fit into the community, and that's how they're doing it, is by selling drugs. So in my research, the real thing I found is that the issue is not something that can be solved with just a money or program or some golden activity that we're going to tell these kids. It comes from the very seams of our society, the very community, that these kids need positive role models. And right now, they're not finding it with their parents. They're not finding it with their teachers or religious leaders or the people in their communities. They're missing it out. And so in order to fix this problem, it takes something deeper. It takes individuals in every life. It takes parents, it takes uncles and grandparents and aunts and teachers and preachers and anybody. It takes everybody in these lives to be these positive role models, to have personal relationships with these kids, to teach them right and wrong, and to provide support and resources so these kids don't feel like they need to resort to criminal activities to provide for themselves. And so through my internship, I worked the juvenile district court in Charlottesville. And it was really crazy to see that the stuff I was researching come to life, because I saw it happening in my own community. So this is the prosecutor for the juvenile district court, Ms. Galloway. And this is my mentor, Judge Barreto. And this is a picture of him sitting in a seat in the courtroom. And for my internship, I got to sit through the dockets of this juvenile district court, which was really awesome, for one, because of COVID. It makes it a lot more restrictive, and for two, these are minors, so this is confidential information. So I was really lucky to get to sit through that, and after the dockets, I would meet with Judge Barreto, and we would have a debriefing session, where he would walk me through each of the cases, explain what happened, and answer any of my questions. I was also able to look through case files of these kids, so I got to see what their charges were, what their previous offenses have been, and they have something called a social background report, which is for reoffending juveniles, and what it does is tells you the parent's history, the parent's involvement in criminal activity, any mental illnesses they have, and any charges they've had with drugs or drug uses. And what I found, just like in my research, that a lot of these kids suffer from one or often all three of these things, and that was a common denominator between all of them. For the second part of my internship, I did the leadership seminar with Mr. Caraway, and I think one of the biggest things, or probably the biggest thing I remember from this, is the first habit in 7 Habits of Highly Effective People, which was it talked about your circle of influence, your sphere of influence in life. And there are things outside your sphere of influence, and there are things inside of your sphere of influence. And you can't get distracted, and you can't let your lack of control over the things outside of your sphere of influence discourage you. That you have to do the things within your own life, the small things that you can do to fix this. And so I try to implement this into my community service. I wasn't trying to fix all these kids' home lives, because I can't do that. I can't find every kid that has a bad situation and fix it. But what I can do is I can try to help the people that I have around me, and I can try to do something good. So for my community service, I worked with the YDC program. And because of COVID, it looked a little different this year. This is me helping create an activity box that we sent to kids, but was just some games and like hot chocolate that they could look forward to. But the main part of my community service focused on the mentoring program, which is a new program that they created this year, which took 11th and 12th graders from high school, and they're setting them up with an elementary schooler or middle school student from YDC, and they're gonna foster a relationship, that it's gonna be a stable person in this kid's life that will help them with school, that will be supportive of them, which will help teach them how to control emotions if they need to, and right from wrong. And this really connected to my research, because what I found was we're lacking these people in our communities, and we want to set these high schoolers up with these kids. And my legacy was creating the introductory packet curriculum for these new mentoring programs. And what I really wanted to stress in that was the expectations, that this is a big commitment, that these kids often don't have a stable person in their life, and you don't want to be just another person that leaves them, and another person that doesn't care about them. And so talking to some of the mentors about this, they really liked that. They liked the stressing of the magnitude because they needed to know what commitment they were making and that this wasn't something that they could quit halfway through the year when times got tough. And so I think the crux of what I learned in this project can be summed up in a Leo Tolstoy quote, which is, everybody wants to change the world, but nobody wants to change himself. And I think that goes back to the sphere of influence thing, where I can't just zap my finger at the world and fix the problem. What I have to do is I have to take action in my own life. And that's what I was trying to do through my internship, or through my community service. I was trying to help these students foster the relationships with these underprivileged kids so that they didn't feel like they had to turn to crime and that they had somebody with them. And so throughout my project, I would say that I got really stressed out at the beginning. And if I had to advise something to future BRVGS students, is that don't allow the stress at the beginning to make you feel like you can't do it and to cause you to procrastinate. Because a lot of times when I procrastinate, it's because I'm stressing and I just can't handle the fact of doing it. So it's not going to be clear to you at the beginning of exactly what you're doing. You're not going to know exactly how your community service connects to your internship and how that connects to your research paper. But if you just follow what the advisor has given you, you do the thing, get your internship done, get your community service done, do the due dates, or do the projects by the due dates, it'll come together at the end. Don't worry about it, your advisor knows what they're doing. And finally, for my future plans, I will be attending the nursing school at the University of Virginia in the fall of 2021. And the main reason I chose nursing connects to the underlying philosophy of this whole thing. That I want to do small, tangible things to help people in this world and to make the world a better place. I'm not looking to enact some giant policy that's going to change everybody's life and that's going to change the entire world, because I don't think that's how it works. I think it's, even by small things, administering a shot or taking somebody's blood, it's by these small, positive things that each and every one of us do that's collectively going to change the world at the end. Thank you.
All right, questions?
Did you say the mentors were going to be 11th and 12th graders from YDC?
Yes, they're 11th and 12th.
And are they going to start that next year?
They've already started it. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead.
They started it a bit this year, but because of COVID and because it's the first year, they haven't really gotten everything settled and figured out completely, but they have matched some kids with YDC kids. But if you're interested, I guess we're all 12th graders, but they have a lack of males because you're supposed to be the same gender. So if anybody knows any males that would be interested in that, that's what they really need.
I'm sorry, I have a follow-up to that. So then do you think as an 11th and 12th grader who volunteers to be that mentor, that there's a bit of a shock value that could come? Because as you said, meeting with that young man, there's a lot of students in our schools that we have no idea what they go through on a day-to-day basis when they go home. Do you think the 11th and 12th graders can handle it?
Yeah, I know that the mentoring process, that they're going to be very tough about the people that they pick. They're going to pick people that they know can commit for that time. And what they really want to do, they don't want you just in the relationship after that year. They want you to continue being in contact, maybe not as much, but you want to be there for that student. You're not there just to get your community service or beta or something. You're there because you want to help this kid out and be that person, that role model in their life.
Do they reach into green?
Sorry?
Is their outreach come into green? Like are they pairing up with students you said in Charlottesville?
This is in green. The Youth Developmental Center is green, and then I did my internship at Charlottesville.
How would one refer a child to get a mentor?
They have to be part of the YDC program, and they would talk to the leader that is Mike Alley, and so that's who you'd have to contact for getting that.
Hannah, you talked about the curriculum that you worked on with that. What kind of stuff is in there? What kind of activities or lessons or whatever?
So first of all, I wanted to put the purpose, the mission statement, the expectations of these people, guidelines, rules. Like especially during COVID, you weren't allowed to meet in person, but even for afterwards, like you're not allowed to go to that person's house without another mentor because there could be dangerous situations. But also, YDC paired up with JMU this year to do projects, and I worked a little bit with those JMU students, and they taught me a lot about behavioral regulation. And so what I also included in there was, if a kid's struggling with something like anger or frustration, what are some tactics that you can use and some tactics you can teach the student to learn how to control their emotions and their behaviors. So that was also a big part of it.
Awesome. Would you mind? Is it possible for you to share some of that with us?
Yeah. It's not completely finished, but I have a rough draft. So.
Yeah, I would love to see some of it, because we've got some students that are looking at doing some mentor stuff within Blue Ridge for next year as part of their senior stuff. So,
I know Alex Sharp and Ari is working with the mentoring program. So.
How do you think with the three, you said parents, substance abuse, and mental illness would be the factors? In your experience or what you know now, how do you think the legalization of marijuana is going to change any of that?
So personally, I'm not in favor of that. I think it just makes it easier to be, it is a gateway drug. It's been proven. You might not be able to get addicted to marijuana, but it kind of opens you up to everything else. And unless you can find a way to control it, and I know often kids that don't have parents that are watching them, they are more susceptible to it. And in the communities, they can find it easier. And I guess I just don't think it's a good idea to make it easier for kids. Even if it's illegal at a young age, you're still making it legal, like alcohol, that somebody older can buy them and give them, especially with gangs, that would be easy to do.
I love your quote from I love that it's about changing ourselves and then changing them around. So would you be willing to share like how this project maybe has changed something of how you look at things or changed you some way? Is that?
I think for one, I've talked to a lot of people, including Mr. Fox, is what is our responsibility for these problems in the greater world? Specifically, we were talking about the Uyghur genocide in China. And it's like, this is a huge problem that almost nobody knows about that I know of. And what can I do about it? And what is my responsibility on the small scale for these huge problems that I feel like I can't do anything about? And I think it's given me a little bit of sense of peace that I have to make that differentiation between what I can do in my own life and what is impossible for me to do in the big scale. So I think it's important for us to teach everybody that you need to be responsible and you need to be a good person in your own life. And that's almost all I can do in that case, is to kind of spread what I've learned, that if everybody was a good person, we'd have no problems. And so if we could just teach everybody to be a positive person and to do the small things and to try to be a net positive in the world, then that would solve all the issues.
Anybody else? All right, let's give another round of applause. Excellent job, thank you, ma'am.
Thank you. Nice job, Aunt Mac.
Thank you.
Get that radio back.
Albert, you want to come on up and get yourself logged in right away?
You got that experience in that.
Yeah, I really enjoyed it. Thank you.
All right, Brian. It's somewhere on your.
Yeah.
Have you got a shirt?
Yeah, I've got it. Well, I've got a pocket inside.
You could probably put it in the pocket if you wanted to, even though it's underneath.
Is that still live? It looked like it. Or did?
What?
Is the mic still live?
Is the battery on?
It's off.
Speak into it.
Chicken one? I'm not seeing anything on the screen now.
Hold the button down.
Good. Okay.
Yeah.
Battery's slipping a little bit, but it's still good.
Okay.
All right. There you go. So yeah, just pocket.
This is the nice thing about having two different things recording it.
Pardon?
Somebody comes up to me and they say they don't have any service. That's a very easy thing to say.
Yeah.
This might not relate super directly to your research, but it's at least something that you can do
Yeah.
to get yourself there.
Yeah.
Thank you.
If you're at school anymore, between now and then, you know, I'll show you some information off of you about the so they can pass it on to the senior next
Well, I would love something
year. I
that.
think he agrees about a lot of stuff.
She
kind of started it, and I just.
Yeah, that's something I was like, it just helps to create a better
Yeah, I think you said, you said already. That's weird. That's weird. That's just weird though.
I mean, I know you're kind of like,
waking up this morning doing it, huh?
Just added some pictures.
Okay, hey, that's a good thing, man. All right, well.
That's something interesting. Maybe you could, because I think that would be a good idea. Yeah, that's what I was about to say.
Getting.
All right, so it's time for our next presentation. Mr. Bryson Talbert is going to be presenting. Go ahead and give him a round of applause. All right. So Bryson has done a lot of work this year on environmental science and environmental sustainability, and you can see his presentation is going to be about a little bit about recycling. I know he did an excellent internship with the Trex company, correct? It's Trex Corporation. He's going to be telling you guys a little bit about that today. So I'll go ahead and hand things over, and he'll go ahead and get started.
All right, so thank you guys. My name is Bryson Talbert, obviously. I'm a senior at William Monroe, just like the rest of you, and this is the 4th year that I've been in Burbank. So as you can see, my presentation will be about the effectiveness of plastic recycling and the methods that are used to recycle plastic and keep it out of landfills. So my main motivation for picking this topic was I love the outdoors. I love fishing. I love hunting. I've always been outdoors my whole life. So the environment is something that's really important to me, and how we manage waste has become recently a really hot topic and something that we really need to pay attention to. So as you can see, my topic is the recycling of plastics and mainly how we keep it out of landfills and the methods of how we do so. So jumping into my internship, as you can see, I did it with Trex. They're a company that makes composite deck boards out of completely recycled materials, recycled plastic, recycled wood. They mix it together and create these durable, weather-resistant deck boards. So their company headquarters is in Winchester, Virginia, so I drove up there and got to intern with this man, Dr. Chuck Hunter. He's the senior manager at the R&D building at their corporation, and he was great. He was able to take me the first day for around a tour, just so I could get a gist of what the company was about and their goals. And so I have a few pictures. That's basically their final product, and then on the right there is their manufacturing facility. And they produce thousands of boards a day. I mean, they're insanely efficient. They only employ about 1,000 people, but they are really one of the most efficient companies in terms of exporting their products to the rest of the country. It's a nationwide known company, and they're just a little 1,000-employee company in Winchester. So this is where I mainly worked in the lab on the left there, and on the right there is the materials that I was using to mix and make their product. I was tasked with basically, they would give me a formula that they were trying, and I would mix it, test it, record data on it, and report back to them. Because they're a very proactive company. They take formulas, try different things, because they're always trying to make it more durable, more weather resistant, and mainly more cheap. So, like I said, they are 100% recycled. And that's their massive warehouse full of plastic, recycled plastic, and they mainly take this stuff from big corporations like Target or Walmart, and they use what's called industrial plastic, which is basically what companies use to wrap their products when they're shipping stuff out. So it's single use. So obviously reusing it in composite deck boards is a much better use for it than just putting it in a landfill. So this leads me into my research question, which is how does Trex Decking's use of recyclable materials impact the influx of plastic into landfills, and how does it compare with other forms of recycling? So, like I said, Trex buys their plastic and uses it directly in their product. They have a stat, I think 15% of all polyethylene, high-density polyethylene plastic in the U.S. ends up being recycled, and Trex takes about half of that. So 7.5% of all polyethylene ends up being used in deck boards. So the other methods, I guess, that I researched were reusing and basically replacing the use of plastics in our everyday packaging materials. And I found that it's much more sustainable. This is going to take a while because we've dug ourselves such a big hole in terms of waste management. Ever since the 60s is when plastic bottles replaced glass bottles as the most used packaging product for beverages. So we dug ourselves such a big hole since then that it's going to take a while to get out of it in terms of creating more sustainable forms of packaging. So I found that basically reducing the amount of use of plastics in our packaging is much more beneficial to the future of our planet and how we fight back on global warming. So jumping into my community service now, as Hannah said with her program, I was a mentor for the Youth Development Council. I got to mentor a kid, and unfortunately, like she said, we weren't able to meet in person, but I texted him, met with Zoom, and got to know him a little bit. I would love to get to know him more, but like I said, COVID had an effect on that. And then also through my church, participating in events like Trigger Trunk, Spring Fling, packaging, everything. They depend on their youth a lot, so we were involved in a lot of events, just helping them serve the community. So moving forward to my legacy, my mentor is Dr. Kyle Purcell, actually, and he gave me the go-ahead to pursue this project and to build it. But this is an organization called a Little Free Library. I don't know if some of you have heard of it. That's our website right there, but it basically allows people to build little structures so that people in the community can freely exchange books without having to use a library card or whatever. And the policy is you put one in, you have to take a book out. And it basically allows the community, like I said, a lot of people don't have a library card, and books are a great source of knowledge. So giving the community the ability to freely exchange books without having to go to the public library, get a library card, or whatever the case may be, really benefits the community. So that's a picture of it. It still needs to be painted and finished and sanded and then obviously installed outside the school. But like I said, I'm really hoping that this gives the community something that they can go to without having to worry about any prior responsibilities, and just freely exchange books that they like or books that they've been looking for. So with regards to my future plans, I plan to go to Longwood University in the fall and study physics with the hopes that I'll be able to transfer to Virginia Tech to pursue a degree in mechanical engineering. So I've always wanted to be an engineer. Creating solutions to problems is a great passion of mine. I love doing it. So that's the main reason I interned with Trex, and their R&D department, research and design, is something that I want to go into. So that's all I have. And any questions?
So I have one.
Yes.
I do believe, I know we've talked about this, and I may have missed it while you were presenting, but you're using Trex material to actually build, or at least portions of your little library, correct?
So The Trex material is really heavy. So I tried to incorporate it, and there could still be a way I can reinforce it using the Trex. I'm thinking about the area, so it's gonna have a post that goes up obviously in the center. And it has a little skirt hanging off to kind of guard against the joining of the post against weather or whatever. So I'm thinking about maybe reinforcing that with the wood and seeing that, but again, it was extremely heavy and very clumsy and very hard to cut. So we'll see if I can still incorporate it, but yeah.
Sounds good. Sounds like you have your engineering degree, or you're going to use that engineering degree.
Yeah.
Good. Awesome.
Is that the only Trex plant in the States? Because you said they didn't.
Yeah, so it's crazy. They, like I said, only employ about 1,000 people, and their headquarters and main plant is in Winchester. And then they have a separate plant in Nevada for some reason, and that's the only place they produce their product.
So the benefit is it's recycled. Is it more durable than pressure?
Yeah, and
what's the benefit of paying more for your Trex?
So I think when they started out, it was mainly a moral thing. We're going to be environmentally friendly. It's become more of a this is how they advertise their product is, hey, we're 100% recycled, and they hope they can appeal to people who really care about the environment. But yeah, so.
So Bryson, you talk about being a chemical engineer, kind of obviously thinking about yourself in a lab and doing stuff. How was your experience there, different than what you thought it would be like?
It was a great experience. It was different in that I honestly thought we would be using technology more, but we ended up using, and I guess we did use technology with the equipment. I was under the impression that we would be using computers and stuff like that, and I'm not very good with computers. So that was a really great surprise that so I didn't show you pictures of it, but there's these machines that test the strength of it, and that was really interesting to kind of work with. So yeah, it was a really great experience.
That's why I have seen the buckets there. It was okay,
yeah.
Looked a little different than what you expected.
So the experiments that you were doing and stuff, what was different with what you were doing versus the product that they're using right now?
So they use, like I said, recycled wood pellets, and then they use a different combination of, their main goal is to find the cheapest, most durable mixture that creates the best product. So they're constantly trying different combinations. And the buckets that you saw, there were sealant and a coloring agent along with the wood particles and the plastic. And again, they're just constantly trying different products, gathering data on it to try and make their product better. And so that's really what the experiments are for. Oh yeah,
I don't know if this is something that you would have gotten into, but you said it was heavier. If it's made out of plastic, what makes it heavier than that?
So it's really, really dense. They use an insane amount of plastic in their actual, so it has two parts. So it has a main bottom layer that's basically, it's probably 7/8 of the thickness of it. And then they have a cap, which is weather resistance. They use a different kind of, they use polypropylene instead of polyethylene on that since it's more rigid, more weather resistant. So it's just extremely dense, and it's got wood, plastic, along with the other particles that I mentioned, which just adds to the weight. So yeah. They also have another product, by the way, so their main high quality product is very heavy because it's thick all the way through. They sell another cheaper product that they cut sections of the bottom out, so it's like in grooves. So it's a little bit lighter, but it's a little less durable. So, yeah. Oh yes, maybe.
What are these ways something that companies can do to prioritize sustainability?
It's like I said, it's going to be difficult because we've dug ourselves such a big hole in terms of sustainable waste management. And it's something that it's if one company does it, it's going to be more expensive for them, and then the other companies probably aren't going to follow suit. So it's something where nobody wants to blink first. Like, nobody wants to make it more difficult for themselves now, if not everybody's going to do it. So I think just taking that first step, I know like everybody's money conscious and money obsessed, but again, just doing the right thing, it's a moral issue, I think.
Anybody else? Thank you, Mark. Take care, man.
Microphone.
Oh. You can keep wearing it.
I hope they got that on video. Oh, no.
Oh,
Does everyone remember when Darcy was here for presenting?
Are you guys still for the whole day? No.
He was just always kind of quiet and
You're smooth and you answer the nonsense.
it's fun to see how
You could have let your mom down.
you were so calm. You were such a calm presence up there.
First, and I was like, you're good. Did you not get that when you told the story about how you broke an arm freshman year? I still remember that speech. It was so good.
I just remember the swan story and Ellie like crying.
I don't really remember that. I remember the arm breaking. I remember Rachel talking about the bathrooms. Abby, I remember you.
Yeah, I remember that.
Ellie talked about like 2 geese falling.
Yeah, and but she started crying, and like everybody started crying because she was.
I do remember the Waffle House story from Rachel.
Oh, yeah, but I think that's all the time.
Oh, she was such a good person. He just came up there and was like, Waffle House story. Let me tell you.
She's like, let me tell you what happened.
Oh, I miss Rachel.
I talked about Culver.
Talk about Bible reading.
I remember, yeah. Sarah, what did you talk
I
about?
talked about that forcing therapy, that I sent you. So like, you got asked questions about different stages of your life.
I really don't remember that.
Really fast.
Sarah's exposing all her secrets.
Your freshman year, like the 2-minute speech was given on like the second year class.
Ready to go?
I did mine on Culver.
Are you saying you don't remember every single part of freshman year, Dana?
I walked out so much of this we did.
I think you did too.
Why?
Not on purpose, I just don't remember.
Do you remember the Julius Caesar debate? Where everybody got super heated?
All right, so for our next presentation, Ms. MAsif is going to be speaking to us. So go ahead and give her a round of applause. All right, so Meredith's going to be talking about something that I know she's very passionate about. She has been visiting me quite a bit this year. She's been in the building, so she is one of the few students that I've been able to talk to on a regular basis, which has been excellent. And she's really shown a lot of passion about talking with regards to psychological trauma and the impact that it has on various different, mostly adolescents and different age groups. So I'm going to go ahead and turn things over to her and let her get started.
All right, my name is BRVGS. I'm a senior at Monroe High School. I've been a part of the BRVGS program for 4 years now. And I decided to do my project on the effectiveness of EMDR in trauma treatment and how effective EMDR is as a method of trauma treatment. So I had no idea what I wanted to do my internship on, my community service on. Like, I just didn't know what I was going to do for this project. And then one day over the summer, I was driving and I had like a moment of clarity. I was like, I've struggled a lot with mental illness and my mental health, so I thought that it was kind of like made for me that I would pursue this as a project for my senior project. And so I wanted it to be in the realm of psychology, but I wanted to target it towards trauma because of a lot of the trauma I personally experienced and gone through, and a lot of the trauma that this pandemic has brought, a lot of the struggle that it's brought, and I just wanted to draw attention to it, learn more about it, and how we can treat it and fix it. So my research question is, does the effectiveness of EMDR vary by the type of trauma experience and the age at which the treatment is received? Now, I realize a lot of you probably don't know what EMDR is, so it stands for Eye Movement Desensitization and Reprocessing. And what it is when you go into therapy for trauma treatment, a therapist will have you either focus on a light bar where the light is moving back and forth and you focus your eyes on it, hand buzzers where you hold them and they vibrate so you're focusing on the feel of them, or auditory senses where you're listening to sounds of like waves crashing, rain falling, just anything that can be considered soothing or calming. And so while your therapist is going to have you concentrate on these exterior things, you will be reliving your trauma essentially. And this sounds kind of dangerous because the thing that makes trauma so traumatic is the unexpectedness of it, how fast it is and how like unpredictable it is. But when you are being treated for EMDR and using this bilateral stimulation while recalling it, it kind of gives the person a sense of control over the trauma, and it allows them to slow it down, and which is very effective because since trauma happens so fast, slowing it down in your head and being able to pre-process it allows you to calm down and ground yourself, and it allows you to adjust to the event and allow you to heal without causing a stress or a psychological trigger. So I focus my research on 3 kinds of trauma in 3 different age groups, so I have a lot of variables as you can see. I focus on child abuse, sexual abuse, and motor vehicle accidents, and my age groups are from 6 to 12, 13 to 18, and 19 to 35. Obviously there are many different kinds of trauma that fall outside of sexual, child, and motor vehicle accidents, and the elderly, and maybe even kids younger than 6 years old, but this is what I decided to focus on, and I wanted to see if the treatment of EMDR is going to be different based on what a person experiences it and when they're being treated for it. So essentially, will a 30-year-old who had child abuse trauma be treated the same and have the same results as perhaps a 14-year-old who unfortunately experiences sexual abuse? And with my research, which was very extensive, very, very difficult, because everyone experiences trauma differently. They process it differently, which is what makes treating it so difficult. It's that everyone is different. They're built different, they experience it differently, which makes it difficult. So I was really curious about the effectiveness of EMDR. And what I came to is that there is no variation, which is what makes EMDR so, so effective. It doesn't matter how old you are when you're being treated, it doesn't matter what you're being treated for. The bilateral stimulation is so grounding that no matter what you experience, after you're done with your treatment, you will have so much clarity, so much peace in your mind. And your trauma will not be so it won't be so hurtful and harmful, and it won't affect you as much. So this leads me to my internship. I interned at Riverbend Counseling Group with my mentor, Chris Santamaria, who is Quinn's aunt. And my internship, to say, was very interesting. It was all virtual, and it was very, very confidential, as you can imagine, because this is dealing with people's experiences and their trauma. And Riverbend deals with other mental illnesses such as depression, anxiety, OCD, but their primary goal is EMDR treatment and trauma treatment. So what I did for my internship is I attended case staff meetings where all the therapists working and the fellows that are training in EMDR are going to talk about their specific cases with each other and discuss how they can benefit their specific clients. I watched client sessions and witnessed a therapist using EMDR to treat a person's trauma, and I took client notes. My community service I fulfilled at Foundation's Child Development Center, and my mentor was Margaret Leckrone. And this community service was so, so special to me because these are kids. And I worked primarily with a group of children who had background in child abuse and child neglect, which made it really eye-opening because these kids are so young
and they're so innocent, and yet they've gone through something so tragic. So it was really special to me, and I was very honored to be able to work with these kids, and I'm continuing to volunteer at Foundations. But I knew that because of the trauma that these kids have experienced, I wanted my legacy to be something that will expose them to mental health at a young age, because the stigma surrounding mental health makes it very difficult to do that, and it makes it very difficult for a person, no matter what age, to be treated later on. So my legacy at Margaret, which is still, like, it's a work in progress, but I have started a program where the kids who have experienced early childhood trauma can talk to each other in kind of a support group setting, where they talk about whether they're feeling stressed, angry, frustrated, happy, sad, like however they're feeling, to expose them to the conversation of mental health, because this will decrease their likeliness of developing a mental illness such as depression and anxiety later on. Just starting the conversation, getting them aware of their own feelings. So this legacy is something that I'm going to continue to work on, something that I'm going to I'm going to push on it, because it's something that's so important to me, to give these kids a peace of mind. So there has been a lot of significance in this project for me. I learned so much about myself, and one of the biggest things was exposing trauma and talking about trauma and starting a conversation so early, and just making treatment so accessible to everyone. It was so special to me, and it was absolutely beautiful to witness people overcoming something that was so horrific. Something I learned about myself, I really thought that after this I'd be set in stone of wanting to be a therapist or a psychiatrist, but now after this I realized that I don't want to be a therapist, but I still want to be part of advocating for mental health and mental illness, because it's a conversation that's very important to me, and I think that in the future it needs to be normalized almost. So an advice I would give to future BRVGS seniors is be confident, but don't be comfortable. Use your connections and start as early as you can. And you don't even have to start your internship or community service over the summer. Just start looking, so that by the time your senior year starts, you have an idea of what your project is going to look like. In the future, I have not decided where I'm going yet. I will either be attending Virginia Commonwealth University or the University of Massachusetts at the Boston campus. I will be majoring in psychology, though I will likely be transferring out of that. And I will be doing all of this on a pre-med track in hopes of hopefully becoming a doctor one day. Thank you, and are there any questions? Yes, Quinn.
So you mentioned destigmatization at a young age. I know a lot of young kids where kind of mental health terms, bigger mental health terms, kind of go over their head. So with your curriculum and your legacy project, are you going to make it so it makes more sense to younger kids, using books or using smaller words and smaller feelings, and just making it easier for them to understand?
Yeah, with kids, you don't want to throw too much at them, or else they'll get overwhelmed. So my goal is to simplify it into something that they understand and that they're comfortable with, so that they continue this conversation as they grow.
So I like how I always say this acronym correctly, EMDR.
Yes.
How you noticed that when you did your research that it seems to be effective across age groups as well as across the various different stimuli or different types of trauma. How long has EMDR been used, and do we have any statistics, any kind of data on long-term effectiveness, 20, 30 years down the road? Maybe you can't answer that based on how long it's been used.
Yeah, actually EMDR has been around for a longer time, which is why I'm kind of shocked that I hadn't heard of it before my internship, but it was developed, I believe, in the 1960s by psychologists, and no one really believed in it at first because it seemed so silly and so naive almost, but it being so effective is what makes it such a long-term trauma treatment, and no matter when you are treated, that treatment will allow you to reprocess your trauma differently, which makes it so long-term, and which is why it's so effective.
you all, and just being present, like you said, you know, in the moment and dealing with your trauma, I think is a very powerful thing. And then you said you're going to go become a doctor. What kind of doctor are you going to become?
I originally wanted to be a psychiatrist, but now I'm not certain. I am thinking of either radiology, ophthalmology, or anesthesiology, but it's not something I need to figure out until year 4 of medical school, so.
Well, so my question is, through all this, how will you use that in your future career? Because mental health affects us every day, all day, any career. So how will you use that?
Right, okay. I think that as a medical professional, I think it's very important to know like the status of patient's medical care and their mental health, not just physical health, because your mental health has such a big impact on your body. So no matter what kind of doctor I become, I'd love to be aware of whether there's a history of mental illness in the family, in the patient themselves, whether they're taking medications for it, because that'll better the quality of care I will be able to give that patient.
That's awesome.
Nikki?
Why do you think it's important for the children to have support and support groups?
So I think the support from my peers has helped me overcome my mental illnesses, and it's really having a support system is a part of it's kind of like a family, right? You have ideally a mom, a dad, if you have siblings, and having that support group is what makes people strong. What makes you want to be stronger for them, what makes them want to be strong for you. And so having that support is going to not only affect your mental health in a positive way, but it'll allow you to branch out and help others in such a positive way, and now kind of be a ripple effect. It'll spread to other people, your friends and their friends that aren't your friends. I think it'll just be a spread. So having that support and offering it will really just start a chain reaction of wanting to be there for each other. Any other questions?
That's good stuff. All right.
And so I go to drink and I can't just, it's so.
Oh, that's really sad.
Yeah, that's pretty much.
Today's the first day that Mom will be
I just think 1 month will never come here again.
They might be careful.
Both of you choosing my won't come back. What if I'm choosing my kid from
You ready to roll? Everybody good?
No. I will move away, but both of you decisions I won't come back to soccer. No, I'm done. As a student. Remember as a freshman thinking about my senior year, I was like, I'm never going to be a senior. And now I am.
Does she have the mic on? Does she have the mic on?
All right, folks, so we're ready for our last presentation before lunch. So I know everybody's getting a little hungry. We're going to give everybody our attention. This is Ms. Abigail Orange, so go ahead and give her a round of applause for the end of the day. I feel like I'm taking this host thing a little bit better now. Anyway, so Abby's been doing a project on histology, and I know that she is a very passionate about this topic. I know this is something that has interested her. She's communicated that to me several times throughout her journals this year, throughout many communications that we've had through email. And it's very exciting to see the product, the final product come together for her. So I'll go ahead and hand things over and we'll get rolling.
So, like Mr. Patterson said, I'm AOrange, and I'm doing my senior project's on critical roles histology plays in science. So, to preface all of this, I worked in the histology labs at UVA in 9th grade, and so I was already a little bit familiar with the atmosphere. But because of COVID, we weren't allowed to be in labs with other people. It was only one per person, so my internship was a little difficult in that sense that my mentor had to be in another room or far away from me. But since I already had a little bit of experience from that, I knew the basics of everything. So I interned at the UVA labs at the Robert M. Byrne Cardiovascular Center under Melissa Bavard, who was my mentor. And the whole reason I wanted to start in the histology labs was because in my career path, I'm looking towards going into healthcare or some sort of medicine. And I knew things like biology and other sciences that we had to take in high school, but I never really knew histology. And even when I worked there in 9th grade, I didn't know what histology meant. I didn't know why we studied it or anything like that. So I thought that it would be interesting to go into an atmosphere that I already was interested in. And so this is my mentor, Melissa Bavard. And another side note is a lot of these pictures, since there was only one person per room, a lot of these pictures are from when I worked there in 9th grade. So that's why there's not masks or why they're not socially distanced. So just making sure. And my question was basically, what critical roles does histology play in science? Because I had no idea what histology even was used for. And so this is the lab that I worked in. And so over here was the chemical hood, and a lot of the things that I did, I wasn't a certified lab technician, so I wasn't able to do a lot of the things that they were allowed to do. So like an intern, I put chemical waste in a labeled container and threw it away. I labeled slides, a lot of just boring, busy work, but at the end I got to help embed mice hearts into wax and see them section it off in order to look at them on slides. And so basically histology is the study of animal tissues and cells on a microscopic level. And so with that, the scientists are able to look at mice and, they're allowed to, give me a second. Sorry, okay, and so histologists study the animal, especially in this wing. It was the Robert M. Byrne Cardiovascular Center. And in the cardiovascular center, you study hearts. So we were focused on mice hearts. And so the scientists were looking at cardiovascular diseases and studying the DNA and the RNA structures in order to find out cures or possible treatments for heart diseases, and so that we could cure it in humans. And so that's basically what I learned. Is my question was, how does histology impact science? And I learned that it's actually a very important part of finding diseases in what I learned in heart diseases. And so that was my research paper and my internship. And then going into my legacy and my community service, they went hand in hand, because for my legacy, I created a mentoring program, the program that HMcInturff was talking about, where at the Youth Development Center in Greene County is a bunch of elementary and middle schoolers that need help in school or at home, and volunteers get to go and help them. And so I've been volunteering there since 9th grade, and I thought a good way to give back to them was to create a program where, like in class, a teacher is one person and they have like 20 kids that they have to teach. So they can't work with each one individually a lot of the time. And so this mentoring program was kind of created so that mentors could work one-on-one with a child, and so that they would be better engaged or they could help them more. And so this is the logo for the mentoring program called Big Hands Helping Little Hands. And it's created by me and Mike Alley, who is one of the council members on YDC. And in doing this, I know since I'm a senior, I have to leave next year and there would be nobody to carry this legacy on. So, me and Alex Sharp, who's a junior BRVGS, became the president and vice president of the company, and we worked with Mike on rules and regulations in order to keep this program going throughout all the next school years to come. And so this coming up year will have more rules, but this year, because of COVID, it was more just Zoom calls, messaging with the kids, but through a lot of emails, we finally got a board meeting, and the board for YDC passed the program, and we started in January mentoring the kids. And there's only 10 of them right now because we only had 10 mentors. And so next year we hope that it will become bigger. With that, my community service was also mentoring these kids, as well as packaging boxes for them for Christmas, Easter, Halloween, things like that. And my take from this was that a lot of these kids don't have a good home life and they have nobody to talk to. And so with this program, you are able to talk to them, get to know them, kind of become their friend. And in doing that, you learn a lot about yourself too, and your character grows a lot more. And as you can see, I'm already a shy person, so doing this program has made me come out of my shell a bit more than I used to be. So that's one of the things that I've improved as my character, because whereas I still might not be able to present very well, I'm more outgoing than I used to be, and I am a lot more confident in my abilities to help others, and that's something that I've grown in a lot as a person, and I encourage other people and future BRVGS seniors, if you could do your community service, like all community service is to help people, but not a lot of it can help you grow your character. But when you do something like this where you're helping other little kids, it could be older though too. But for me, with these little kids, it really helped me improve how I viewed myself and how I viewed the world. And so that was my take from it. And I'm going to University of Mary Washington next year to study biomedical sciences. And what's pretty cool about that is one of the courses that you have to take is histology. And since I did my internship on that, I already kind of have a background knowledge of that. And so that is it. Thank you.
Before we turn to any questions, Abby, I just want to say that I'm very impressed with you, and I think sometimes you may sell yourself short. I think you're an excellent presenter. It took a lot of courage to stand up there today for you. I know that did, and I'm very proud of you. You do speak very well, though, and I think that you can use that in the future. And it's awesome to see how much you've grown as a student and as a young professional during this process. So be proud of yourself and don't sell yourself short on that, all right?
And just 2 years back, when you wouldn't even make eye contact with anything but the floor when you were doing a presentation in my room. So this is huge for me, seeing you at this point, standing confidently in front of it. You stumble, we all stumble.
Yeah.
You've come a long way. It's pretty awesome to see.
I was just trying to not cry. This
But you showed a lot of passion, and that's admirable and very courageous of you. All right? Does anybody have any questions?
I have a question.
Ms. Fox?
So I'm curious, what sparked your interest in histology?
So my brother and I had both worked there just because our dad works in part of the UVA and he was friends with somebody that worked in the histology labs. So when in 9th grade when I started working there, it was mainly because I just had that connection. But since I didn't really get to learn a lot about that, and I worked there, but I had no idea what histology was. Like when my dad had asked me, I couldn't give him an answer. So I wanted to go back and actually be able to learn more and understand what it was.
And one thing about the mentor program, I think it's amazing that you started that. It's something that's really needed in Green because we're so small and so far away from Charlottesville. Our younger students don't have a lot of opportunities for that. And I'm really excited that it's growing with the next, like a junior Burbank. So is the plan for then Alex to hand it down to the next junior and so on?
Yeah, so it might not be Alex's like Burbick's project, but she does plan to take over as like president of the program next year, and then it should be passed down. And I meant to cover this, but some of the questions that you had asked Hannah, Mr. Purcell too, is the mentors are picked from like, they're not necessarily just let in like beta club if they have all A's or something like that. They actually have to be interviewed, like not necessarily background checked because we're underage, but like they have to be good people, not just good students, so that they don't just leave the child hanging halfway through the year.
So with your histology, working with them, do you think that that would be open to like more students being able to do that kind of stuff, lab work at UVA, or that your connection made that possible?
I know that I've spoken with 3 other people that have gone to like Monroe or Charlottesville that have had no affiliation with like other people that worked there, and you just have to apply to like have an internship or work there or something. But right now, because of COVID, they can't let anybody go.
Since you did YDC since 9th grade, or helped with it since 9th grade, what do you think has been your greatest impression of going through that program for the past 4 years?
My greatest impression?
Yeah.
It was, well, when I first got there, similar to Hannah, like hearing some of the children's stories were definitely like, I don't come, like both of my parents are in my household and I always have food, they don't abuse me or things like that, but I heard stories like that from kids that were in like 4th or 5th grade, and it was really sad to hear, but seeing that how like they could still smile, they could still laugh, play with their friends, that impression kind of made me see that a lot of people have it way worse and they still choose to be happy about life and things.
Anybody else? Go ahead, McInturff. I need McInturff. Unless you want to talk about it. I guess I should find
Say
it.
goodbye to the recording.
All right, so at this time, we're going to have a little bit of an extended break for some lunch. Ms. Bunovich and Ms. Goodwin are in the back, so we're going to go back there. They've got your, I don't know if I can do Mr. Reynolds' dance. All right, guys, so I'm giving everybody about a 2 or 3 minute warning. We're going to try to kind of move our ways back to our seats after we get a chance to clean up. Please make sure you dispose of your garbage where it belongs so that we can continue to use the PAC in the future. Trevor's going to get himself set up and we will get rolling in about 2 or 3 minutes so we can stay on schedule. Thank you.
college instructor here, but seniors like to get on.
I know. It's funny, the whole actress thing, I get it. So that was fun.
You just have to get used to the pain.
Hey, Mr. Patterson.
Yep, I just do it right on their lapel.
Did it cool off?
Mr. Patterson?
Yes.
So when I updated my slides, I was having trouble exporting it because if I'm not on the computer, it's harder to do. Can I log into my Canva account on there, or does it have to be through Google Drive?
Can you log on to which account?
Canva? It's like a design.
As long as it works, it's
Sure.
fine.
Yeah, we'll let you log in and see if it works,
mean-
and if it does, then that's great. Well,
Yeah.
hopefully
Or
we'll.
if you have a computer it's working on, we can hook that computer up.
I don't with, I
Okay.
don't with you, but.
As long as it's something that's cloud-based, we should be able to get to it, yes.
Yeah.
Okay. All right, we'll give Mr. Caraway a minute.
It doesn't make Gaggle unhappy. As long as it makes Gaggle unhappy.
I had quite a lunch. How about you?
What? Did you eat Mr. Clark?
I ate a sandwich. Pretty fancy.
Fancy stuff, right?
How was your Domino's pizza pie?
Fantastic, but the whole time.
Just like it is every time?
Took me back to my
It was really funny when I sent out the survey for those who answered. It was like, there was nobody who asked for Subway. I was like, okay.
Because it's Burbick's. It has
Apparently
to be
this is
pizza.
like
gotta be
a
pizza.
thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Like, all right, so.
It's blasphemous.
It's blasphemous, I
It's
see. Just tradition, right? All right, thank you guys. So we're going to go ahead and get rolling on our last set of 4 presentations for the day. So Trevor Myers is going to be our next presenter. Go ahead and give him a round of applause. Got a few stragglers in the back. Take your time, don't fall. We don't need another broken leg. Sorry, Reese. All right, so Trevor's been doing his project this year on something that I think is going to be very beneficial, hopefully to myself, but if not to myself, certainly to the school division in the future. He's been working on performance-based assessments and trying to compare them to standardized testing and things like that. And I believe he's also put together a bit of a portfolio or a website or a repository, if you will, of some various different lessons and activities as well as resources for teachers in the future. So I'm really excited to see what he's been able to put all together, and I'll go ahead and hand things over. And here comes Trevor.
Thank you. So my project here is going to be on performance-based assessments and comparing them to standardized testing. No? All right. So I'm going to start off by giving 2 definitions. First is performance-based assessments. These assessments measure a student's ability to complete a task, and basically it's showing what a student knows rather than telling it on a standardized test. A standardized test is any kind of assessment that is created, graded, and assessed in the same way for all students. So I have a quote here: "The difference between a successful person and others is not a lack of strength, not a lack of knowledge, but rather a lack of will." This really describes my internship process. Coming into here, I was really excited to go to aerospace engineering and find an internship. Initially, I reached out to 5 different firms, all of which said no. I then reached out to 3 more firms from my coaches and other people I knew. All of them said no. I then tried to play with my football team, something to interest me, and again, that didn't work out. Eventually, I ended up working with Ms. Fox on performance-based assessments and trying to gather data, comparing them to standardized testing. So a survey I sent out last week when my internship was finally getting going was what students prefer. This was the age range of the students. I was able to get a good mix of everyone throughout the high school. And this is what the data showed. It showed that 72% of students prefer performance-based assessments in comparison to standardized testing. Even though in the high school, the majority of testing done is still standardized testing and not performance-based assessments. 17.02 points. That is the increase students perform better on performance-based assessments when compared to standardized testing. 15.58%. That is the increase in the graduation rate of students who perform performance-based assessments in comparison to standardized testing. Now, this study was one done by Mississippi State and does not account for all students. It was also done on CTE students, which are career and technical education students, those in our tech center, for example. So this does not mean all students perform better on performance-based assessments, but it does show there is data that performance-based assessments tend to help students perform better in school. More of my research. So starting with No Child Left Behind, that was when a big push for standardized testing began. Back in the 90s, performance-based assessments were really big throughout the country. However, the big issue that the government was having is there was no national accountability for this type of testing. From school to school, district to district, state to state, there was no national standard to tell how students were really performing. So the purpose of No Child Left Behind was to create one system where everyone could be compared. The issue with that is you're comparing students of vastly different areas to each other. A student in a low-income area might not have housing, might not have heat, might not have food. Meanwhile, a student in a very high-income area might have access to all of those things. So how can you accurately compare those two students when what's happening outside of school is so different? Then, in 2015, the Every Student Succeeds Act was passed, which aimed to reform No Child Left Behind. So a quote from Mrs. Fox. Higher order thinking skills, student motivation, and engagement is higher with a PBA. This was the conclusion that I reached for my analysis of my research paper. I found that while there is no one method that is better at teaching students, a combination of the two is the best. Throughout the year, using a performance-based model for teaching students allows them to have more information retention and be more engaged with the material. They're really applying the skills instead of just trying to memorize them and put them on a test, which really isn't beneficial to them, to just forget it a week later. I found that standardized testing does still need to happen in our school system. It allows for accountability. Without that, there's no way to measure which students and which school districts are giving students the best chance to succeed and which school districts aren't. So a little bit of my community service, my legacy portion, they really go together. I created a website for the elementary, middle, and high school, 3 separate websites, to house professional development resources for teachers, students, parents, and administrators. Originally, all this information was kind of stored in Google Drives and scattered throughout, as I found. So by working with the instructional coaches, we were able to compile all this information together, which I was then able to input into one single website. These are some photos I've gathered throughout this process I've taken of just the website and the resources they have, which are now accessible to all people once the website will be launched. So this also is part of my legacy portion. Eventually, when this website is complete, either if it's handed down to another BRVGS student or it's taken over by instructional coaches, the purpose of this website will be to serve the entire county and will be implemented into the Greene County Schools homepage website. So just talking a little about perseverance. That was my biggest issue throughout this entire presentation, was finding an internship. I know I've had lots of talks with Mr. Patterson about, here's my internship, oh, never mind. Here's another internship, oh, never mind. And it's over and over again of finding an internship was the biggest challenge I've had. Halfway through the year, I considered dropping BRVGS just because I didn't think it was worth the time and the hassle. But for whatever reason, I decided to stick it out, and here I am, completed my internship this past weekend. I was really excited about it. But it all worked out, and I was really happy with how everything turned out. Also with a learning stretch. So that was a big emphasis on this project, was really trying to create something that we weren't familiar with. I mean, everyone in this room is familiar with standardized testing. Since third grade, we've all talked about standardized testing and its importance. But I didn't know the why. Why is it so important? And so by doing this project, I was able to learn more about why standardized testing and accountability is crucial. We might not like it, but it's needed to make sure everyone stays accountable. However, by switching to a more performance-based assessment model for the school year, it will allow students to have a better chance to succeed throughout life, not just in the classroom and performing on tests better. For example, the BRVGS Senior project is a big performance-based assessment, essentially. And by doing this project, I feel I'm better prepared at public speaking. I'm better prepared at collaboration, finding internships, and skills that will apply after high school. By giving a test, you're not helping students succeed throughout life. Performance-based assessments allow students to be better prepared throughout the rest of their career. And for my future plans, I will be attending the University of Colorado at Boulder to study aerospace engineering. Thank you. At this time, I'll take any questions.
Question?
Would
you say performance-based assessments more accurately represent the student's knowledge in that specific field?
I would say they do. A performance-based assessment can be tailored to each individual student, while standardized test is one test given to everyone. So by tailoring it to individual student needs, you can more accurately reflect their ability and show their growth. Quinn.
Did you do any research in the effectiveness of performance-based assessments versus standardized testing for kids who suffer from learning disabilities, like kids with ADHD or kids with autism?
I did not do any specific research on that, but what I did find is that by using a performance-based assessment, students or teachers have the ability to tailor it to each individual student and their individual needs to help each student perform the best they can.
So are you talking like an end of the year PBA replacing standardized testing, or are you talking like incremental along the way? Like how would you implement that? Don't look at her. I want to hear your idea. I want your idea. I know her.
So working with Ms. Fox, that's kind of a big thing we're having right now. We're trying to implement it into the high school. I think you can do both. You can implement it throughout the year. You also have the 11th, the juniors have their writing PBA, which are using to replace the writing SOL. So I think by using a more performance-based assessment model, you can still give tests out to gauge students their progress, but focusing on more of a performance-based assessment model throughout the year can allow for more projects to occur and students to engage more with each other.
Do you think that takes kind of the high stakes out of it by having PBA at the end of the year, or is that the same pressure still going to be there?
I think a big part of my survey I found a lot of students said they prefer performance-based assessment because it gets rid of the high stakes testing on how a test on one day has to reflect their knowledge of an entire year, which does not accurately reflect. A student can have a bad day. So how should their performance on one day determine what they learned for an entire year, and how should the school be held accountable for that?
And lastly, on your 50, who were your 50? Was it a good representative example, or do you feel like you may have targeted?
So I had talked to Mr. Wimmer about that and Ms. Fox initially. If you make it required and make a required survey, you're going to get random answers. The students aren't really participating in it, they're just answering it. If you make it optional, you're only reaching a select group of students, those who are going to open their email and answer an optional survey. So there really is no right way or wrong way. There's errors with either method of trying to gather data.
So did you go the optional route, I'm assuming, then?
Yes, I did do the optional route.
Yeah, that's understandable.
Trevor, you mentioned that this project is a performance-based assessment. Really, it's a culminating piece for all of the stuff that you guys have done all the way through, right? I mean, starting all the way back with Virtual Museum in Mr. Fox's class and Rabbitopsis and different projects that you did as online. One of the things we try to do is, I mean, for us, we're trying to connect all those things to build some of the skills, like some of what you're talking about, like they'll have more, kids will have more to take away when they do that. But sometimes I wonder if the students in the program really truly understand all of, what that purpose is behind that, So, I mean, you guys know, you've done a ton of, this isn't the first time you've done a presentation. This is like into the 6th or 7th, as far as, what can we do to better communicate like that purpose of the PBAs that we have in Blue Ridge?
So I don't know if it's really something you do to better communicate. Initially, I always hated presentations. I think most high schoolers, going into high school, people don't love public speaking. No one gets excited to go talk in front of a bunch of random people. I think it really has helped me, and it will help me throughout my life. I mean, public speaking is something that will always have to occur throughout any career you choose. So I feel that knowledge we've gained from doing this experience has really helped me. I don't know if there really is one thing you tell students to really emphasize the importance of it. That's why I love doing this project so much, is I was able to learn the importance of it. I was able to look at the data and see, without accountability, how are schools going to be held, like, where schools can teach whatever they want to teach. They can get terrible test scores without any repercussions to them without accountability.
By the way, I'm glad you stuck with it.
What do you, excuse me, how do you feel about PBAs for standardized testing with the equity? We've talked about equity throughout today. Do you see one being better than the other?
I personally think performance-based assessments are better for equity. As you can see with the SAT, for example, they're saying that low-income students don't have the same advantages as high-income students. They don't have access to private tutors. They don't have access to the resources. So you're having students with different amount of resources taking the same test. So how can you expect a student with very little preparation and little access to resources to perform at the same level and judge them to the same degree as a student with access to different resources, such as tutors and other mentors?
Any others? Excellent job. Everybody wants to keep it on for the rest of the day. You can keep on having you on the slide.
There you go.
All right, Hannah, did we say we?
Live stream all my conversations for the rest of the day.
Yeah, probably just put one put there and I'll just some things up, you know, moving on.
Alrighty. Getting around pretty good on that. Good.
Yeah, I think that's my good.
Where's the keeping go?
It's just
I know, it's just like behind Trevor's where I can't see him.
How are you keeping? I haven't seen you in a year and a half.
I've been in school like 3 times.
Your hair looks good from the back. I haven't seen it from the back.
No, I said she was just gonna have it in the background for a little bit. She likes everybody.
My parents do not. My parents don't even know what everybody says.
I saw your dad yesterday.
And he said something at Starbucks.
I went to Starbucks yesterday. That was before my 9-hour trip.
My parents were so much fun at Starbucks. Between him, my mom, and my sister. This is why I never want to drink coffee. It's an addiction.
I'm not addicted to that. Say that.
My parents,
I'm
$3 a day on
getting
coffee.
my
Actually, you're
caffeine addiction.
And a child. So then
Gonna try it.
Yeah, you have to get your brother saying that they
No, I was gonna.
I can hold the mic for you.
Hannah, I can hold the mic.
She was talking about you.
Oh. Thank you.
Okay, leave your numbers down.
Okay. All right.
You can hook
All
it
right,
onto
so
your
we're ready
leg.
to go. Go ahead and give a round of applause for Ms. Hannah Lee. So have to say that even though Hannah was not in the building this year, she's been in contact with me quite a bit. We've had quite a few conversations, and I'm actually very excited to see how this project completely, or kind of concludes for her. Her mentors, not internship, her community service supervisors have actually been in touch with me a couple of different times this year, and I don't even know if she knows this, but we are kind of working together on potentially taking some of the things that she's done for her community service and her legacy and extending them not just to future BRVGS students, but actually through me as well, for some programs for coaches and stuff like that moving forward, trying to help out with some of the student population in the building, building relationships and things like that. So I'll let her tell you a little bit more of the details with regard to that, but I just want to say that I'm really excited. I'm glad she's here. I'm glad that she's able to get her way up here, and just, we'll go ahead and give her your attention, and she will start.
Hi everyone, I'm HRees. Nice to see you all, know you all. So the title of my project is Female Ambition, the key components to female success in the classroom and outside of the classroom. We all know how important education is, especially with the disparities that we see between female students. You know, they have specific effects that only impact them. You know, you have female reproductive health that only affects women, and just various other systemically ingrained ideals. So the inspiration and my overarching topic is this. All of these components, human rights, social justice, female success, and prevention work, all really inspired me. I was raised by a single mother, and that's a really big part of my life. I was always inspired seeing her doing her best for me and for our family, and seeing what women could do with the right encouragement. And that's extremely vital to their success when they're in school and when they leave school. So I wanted to introduce the people behind my project because they really inspired me and helped make my project what it has become. So the first person, does this have a, yes. So the first person is Mr. Todd Niemeyer, and he's the Community Outreach and Investigation Specialist at the Charlottesville Office of Human Rights. An amazing man. He's been working in the Charlottesville community for a long time, including in one of the community gardens, as you see him here, surrounded by plants. And then the other two people were part of my community service. My mentor, Jada Cox, who's the Bystander Empowerment Specialist at the Sexual Assault Resource Agency, and her co-worker, Lori Jean Seaman, the Director of Prevention at the Sexual Assault Resource Agency. Todd does a lot of work with investigating claims regarding racial discrimination in the Charlottesville community, including housing and job discrimination. And Jada and Lori Jean work directly with a lot of high school students in the community, teaching them how to prevent discrimination, how to prevent abuse, and how to see these signs and what to do if you see something happening. So my internship and my community service were both completely virtual. I've been home, and then of course I broke my leg, so I've been at home in general. So I did a lot of my virtual work with Todd Niemeyer online, and even my expert interviews online. So the majority of my internship was attending the Human Rights Commission meetings, which is a branch off of the Office of Human Rights. I went to these meetings, I learned what they were talking about. They're a part of the city council, so it was a government organization discussing issues in the Charlottesville community. Then I would meet with Mr. Niemeyer afterwards, and I would ask him questions and debrief about what we had learned. Over here, I think a notable meeting is when the Charlottesville mayor was at one of the meetings, so I got to hear her talk and be directly involved. The second part of my internship was doing Mr. Carraway's leadership seminar, and the most notable part of it for me was reading this book, Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking. I consider myself an outgoing introvert, so I seem really outgoing, but I always need time to recharge after a long day. And this book really touched on the components of what introverts can do and what they can do that maybe extroverts can't. It went over people like Jackie Kennedy and Eleanor Roosevelt and how they led without being at the forefront of things. So moving on to my community service, I worked with Jada Cox virtually. As you can see, she's also virtual. She's in her house. What we would do is we would discuss the teen programming that they have in the Charlottesville community and other communities, and she asked for my advice on how they could improve the teen programming, how to reach students better, to make sure that they're doing the prevention work and preventing abuse and discrimination in action in real time. So we would talk about all the teen programming, and I would also create social media for their Instagram accounts, whether it's a relaxing night in, how to take care of yourself, important events that were coming up, or special holiday things. So this leads me to my burning question. What is the best way to promote the success of females in the classroom and in life after graduation? And note that it says, and thus in life after graduation. And I did this on purpose because you have to have, because witnessing your own success within school makes you realize that you can succeed after the classroom. And this is called self-efficacy. That's your ability to believe that you're capable of doing something. And in my research, I found that that was a very common word to come up. In every article I read, every journal, self-efficacy was extremely important to the success of female students. If they have a mentor, a female mentor, who shows them that they can do something and encourages them, and they have family members who are encouraging them, female students succeeded and had higher levels of self-efficacy. The other part that I would like to mention from my research is I based a lot of it off of Maslow's hierarchy of needs in the pyramid seen here. Some of you may have seen this, and we learned about it, or I learned about it specifically in 8th grade during a science class, and it stuck with me all throughout high school. Maslow's psychological and philosophical and psychological theory is that everybody needs the basic needs, the things you need to function in general, bodily function. You need air, you need water, you need food, you need shelter. Otherwise, your own physical body can't work. As you go up, there are other things that maybe you don't need to function immediately, but you need in order to have self-efficacy, to be able to take care of your mental health, and to succeed in class. It goes all the way up to your own self-efficacy up here, but as you can see, one of the most important things is friendship and intimacy and family and connecting. And that's where a lot of what I found in my research is that in having all-female groups that you're a part of, female students benefited a lot from those groups, seeing what you could do with the other girls who are your own age, going through the same things as you are. And having family who supports you, whether they have resources or not, it was significantly important for them to just be there for you. So a sense of community. So like I said, my findings were that healthy home environments were vital, positive female role models were essential. They significantly increased female success. Academic resources, having access to counseling, tutoring were extremely beneficial, and access to all female community groups. I actually wanted to share that the reason I decided to look into this specifically is because I would go with my a cappella group, Drop the Bass, here at William Monroe, and we would go to these all-female events where we would talk about the same things I worked with SEarle, the sexual assault prevention agency. We would discuss bystander intervention, what to do when you see something happening, female empowerment, all of these essential things. And that's really what inspired me, being a part of that group. I was around other women who loved singing and loved making music together, and it was an extremely wonderful connection to have. And it really uplifted me in my self-efficacy because I was helping run the group, and I realized that I was capable of so many things. As for my legacy project, as you can see here, I'm sitting in a chair by my window because I had my leg propped up. There's Mr. Patterson and Jada, Lori Jean, and Miss Brunel. We all met to discuss my legacy project, which part of it is the social media content that I created while I was at SEarle, but the other part of it was creating a connection between William Monroe and the Sexual Assault Resource Agency. So the first step was making that connection, getting the employees that I worked with at SEarle and Ms. Brunel and Mr. Patterson in the same room, so to speak. They have a lot of programming, as I mentioned, in other local high schools, and it's something I noticed that we needed around here. A lot of times I would come to school here, you'd hear rumors about things happening, and whether those rumors are true or not, you need to have those resources in case they are. You need to have prevention resources and survivor resources, and that's something that SEarle can provide. So the first step was making that connection and getting that programming in place, so hopefully it could continue after I graduate. The second part was getting Ms. Brunel and the school board to approve a meeting that I'm having on Thursday. So if you haven't signed up, you should sign up. There is a meeting on Thursday that I'm hosting with Jada and Lori Jean for faculty, parents, and students to learn about bystander intervention, racial discrimination, gender discrimination, and healthy relationships, all things that teenagers need to be aware of. And it's not just for female students either, it's for male students and female students, just to spread awareness. So as you can see here, these are some of my samples of my social media. This was for Valentine's Day, and this was for holiday or Christmas. And this is the poster I created for my meeting on Thursday, which I'm very excited about. It's something that the community needs. Looking back, I can't say I had as many challenges as my classmates, which I respect them for greatly, but I emailed the Office of Human Rights back in late summer, and I got a response, and they were very excited. They'd worked with a BRVGS student before, and they were super excited to have another intern. It was extremely rewarding, and I was able to learn so much about local government and how it relates to human rights in general and specifically. And the same thing with my community service. I actually started by reaching out to the Shelter for Help in Emergency for female survivors of abuse and children. And they provided housing and other resources for these survivors. What ended up happening is I had a mentor that I was going to have there, and she moved out, like some of you experienced. She moved, so they handed me over to SEarle, where I was able to work with Jada and Lori Jean. And it ended up working amazingly. I learned so much. I had no idea what bystander intervention was. I didn't know how any tactics for preventing abuse if I saw it in public. And it was an amazing experience, and they have so much knowledge about female empowerment. My advice would definitely be to start early and to ask questions. I reached out to two amazing programs, and they both welcomed me in with open arms. And it never hurts to ask. You're always able to find someone who has something to share with you. This brings me to my future plans. The opposite of Quinn, I'm going to the Ohio State University, where I plan to study international affairs and international studies, French, and hopefully theater as well. My hope is that I get to work with foreign affairs, whether government or nonprofits, or become an immigration lawyer. I don't know, it's all up in the air. But as you can see, there's my family and I at campus. So, that is it. Thank you.
Anybody with any questions?
So with your meeting on Thursday, how will you keep that kind of thing going? Like it's great that you're doing it, but how's that going to continue?
Right, so we're planning to record the meeting on Thursday, and my hope is with Ms. Brunel's help that we get to put it on the school website or somewhere else public that future students can access it. And that's the other thing, like Mr. Patterson was saying, the connection in general, they have so many programs to offer. They have coaching programs for athletes to receive information about abuse and help with that. And they have the other general programs. They have ambassador programs where you train students on this stuff, and you can, they take it to their other students. But mainly the reporting, so that everyone can access it. Oh, Ms. Fox.
So your initial burning question about, key components to women succeeding, and then your internship opportunity, how have you connected the two, or used information from one and the other?
Right, thank you for asking that. I had gone into all of this being inspired by, of course, the Charlottesville protests in 2017, the Black Lives Matter protests, and then, like I said, my mom. I came into this knowing that human rights was a passion of mine, and then having been a part of that internship, I was able to see how it affected minorities in the community in general, and that got me thinking about the inspiring women I had met during that internship, like Chantel Bingham. There's a picture of her. She was one of my expert interviewees. And all these women who were leading the charges on this stuff. And I was thinking, well, why not figure out how to help people get to that point where they're leading the charges and how they're empowering others. So that's kind of what I connected. It went from human rights to minorities to women in that kind of work. Mr. Perry.
Hannah, I was thinking about, as you were talking about some of the things that really seem to be helpful and supportive of kind of female empowerment. And one of those female-only kind of things for students to do. I know we've offered a few things like UVA Society of Women Engineers. So occasionally we sent students to those, and I think they found that really strong, powerful experience for that reason. I'm just wondering if you could think of anything else we could be doing in Blue Ridge that might kind of promote that or promote opportunities like that better.
Right. One thing that I participated with BRVGS was being on the women's committee during the Model UN, one of the Model UN conferences we went to. And that was extremely rewarding, just keeping that kind of thing up, going to Model UN conferences where they have all-female committees. And the other thing is I was inspired by Lauren Reynolds from last year. She did research on engineering groups, all-female and STEM engineering groups, offering that kind of thing, just in diverse topics, music, human rights, science, all of that. It has to be diverse so that you get those girls interested.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any others?
That's with the Model UN stuff.
high. You need to get like in the middle of your shoulder. Yeah, I agree. All right. Uh-oh. We lost Dexter. You guys good?
We're good. I'm not sure.
I don't know. That's Dexter for you. Sneaky, sneaky. All right, you good? All right, so I grabbed the wrong one. Testing, testing. We'll try the other one. Yeah, Hannah's was kind of in and out too. I noticed that just a little bit every now and then. She shouldn't have to eat it for us to hear her. Test it. Okay, there we go. Awesome. All right, so our next to last presentation for the day is going to be Mr. KSutton, so go ahead and give him a round of applause. Keegan's coming to us today, and he's going to be discussing methods that he has found that help to increase youth voter turnout. It's a very important topic, I think, in today's society, and I think that you guys would probably, for the most part in this room, agree. So I'm going to go ahead and hand it over to Keegan, and he'll go ahead and get started.
So going into the project last summer, I knew that I wanted to focus on politics. It's something that's started to interest me over the past couple of years. And around last summer, I decided that I wanted to focus, or end of last summer, I decided I wanted to focus on the youth voter turnout. It's fairly common knowledge that the youth voter turnout, in which case youth stands for people ages 18 to 29, is much lower than any other demographic, or age demographic. So at that point, I'd already missed the primary process when looking for my internship. Those tend to be a lot more localized and just easier to volunteer at. But the general election was still a ways away. So for my internship, I ended up doing Mr. Caraway's leadership seminars, similar to what Hannah did for part of hers. And for those, I did those for all of my 10 internship hours I needed. And those were the Zoom sessions, where either Mr. Caraway or other qualified speakers would talk about leadership, what makes a good leader, what leadership entails. We would give our thoughts, respond to articles, and similar to Hannah, again, I also read Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking. That was a very informative book. Again, focusing on the power, what introverts can do in leadership scenarios that are usually dominated by extroverts. That's what I did for all my 10 internship hours, and that's one of my, not necessarily regrets, but looking back upon the project, I wish I would have pursued harder a more traditional internship. Early on in the year, my motivation has never been amazing. And COVID has not helped that situation. But in the end, it worked out, and that led into my community service project. So the first part of my community service project, I volunteered as a page on the November 3rd election. And basically, a page is just their term for just a general helper. Because I was under the age of 18, I could not legally touch any ballots. So I couldn't help at the desks where they're handing out the ballots, help people, if it's an older person that doesn't know how to fill them out, or handle the ballot machine. I couldn't do any of that. So what most of my community service entailed was either directing the line or answering questions people might have when they enter the door, just anything they needed me to do at that point. And the precinct that I volunteered at was at Ruckersville Elementary School in the gym, and I volunteered there for 6 hours. So showed up at 7 a.m. at opening, left around 1. So the second part of my community service project laid heavily into the legacy portion. For this part, I created and am in the process of distributing a website that focuses on the importance of voting, and just as a place where I could put all of the spread out resources on how you vote, where you find your registration form, how do you fill it out, where do you have to return it to if you choose to fill it out in person. So this is one of the pages on my website. Oh, there we go. And it has information and various links because the Virginia government has resources that shows you how do you find your precinct. Here's how you can download your registration form. But they're all spread out over different locations. So I put them all in one location. And I'm in the process of distributing it. I had started on this portion of my community service a little late. So I'm in talks with distributing it through the dual enrollment, through the PLS classes, in talks with Mr. Caraway as well. And those led into my research. So my burning question that I focused on is just, what is the most effective way to increase youth voter turnout? This is a topic that there's a lot of outside research on, both about the causes of why youth don't vote and individual methods that increase the youth voter turnout. I couldn't find as much research about, however, just what happens when you use a lot of those methods. So that's what I focused my paper on. There are a lot of methods in place. Each state uses a various combination of some of them, all of them, or none of them. So some of the ones that in my research I found is that when you look at them, some of these methods only increase the youth voter turnout by, say, 5% to 10% on average, is what I found. But that doesn't sound like a lot, but when you consider that 2020 showed that elections can be decided on margins of less than 1%, that increasing that by 10% is a huge change. And when you consider that, let's say the youth voter turnout in the 2018 midterms was only about 35%, adding 10% to that is a huge gain. So the most effective way that I found was a mixture of combining every available method to increase just general votes, such as automatic voter registration, where upon any interaction with the DMV, you register to vote. The system does it automatically. Combining that with, say, voter pre-registration, where you can be registered to vote when you're under 18, and then as soon as you turn 18, you're officially registered. So combining those allows, say, when you go to get your learner's permit, you're automatically in the system. And when you turn 18 in 2.5 years, 2 years, you're automatically registered. The other thing is you combine those methods that just drive turnout in general with social media engagement. Some of the statistics I found said that 33% of youth reported that they had only heard of elections over social media. That's a huge percentage. So if you drive social media engagement through targeted ads, collaborations with popular platforms, you can drive people who may be somewhat interested in the voting process, but haven't officially made the step to being registered or showing up to vote, because you can make it as easy as it can to vote, but that doesn't mean that the youth are going to show up if they have no drive to do so. So by combining social media engagement, providing information that makes them more confident, because one of the commonly most cited reasons that youth don't vote is they don't feel confident in their knowledge of the process. So if you can distribute that knowledge over social media, which youth use more than any other type of media, you can drive their information or increase their information in the process. And then, if you make it easier to vote, increases their motivation to get out there and vote, and it decreases the amount of time and effort it takes to do so. And this leads into my conclusion and ending thoughts. So, as I stated earlier, politics is something that have interested me for over the past couple of years. And through this process, I have decided that I will be majoring in political science through Northern Michigan University. Through there, I reached out through a program, it's called the Freshman Fellowship Program. So my first year, I'll be working with a professor in the political science department, helping them with research, just various methods like that. And then there are other internships and opportunities I can pursue there.
Anybody have a question?
What would you say to people who think, since it sounds like these people aren't really interested in the politics, what is the good in trying to get them to vote when they sound like they might not be the most educated or they don't even really care? Why do you want them to vote if they aren't interested in it?
So, youth don't actually commonly cite that they don't care about voting. The most commonly cited reasons that they don't vote it varies from study to study, year to year. But the most common ones are they either don't feel that they have enough time or they don't feel confident in their knowledge about the project. The amount of youth that actually cite that they just either don't care or just don't believe their vote matters is very, very low. So, one second. So the amount that don't care are very, very low, and the ones that don't care, it's very hard to change their minds. The ones that you target to increase the voter turnout are the ones that are on the edge. So who thought about voting, haven't really taken the step to get registered, and know a little bit about the project, but aren't confident in their knowledge on either the process or candidates, or just the process.
You alluded to a conversation with Mr. Caraway. I think DMV is too hard to take on. What would you recommend, like, locally, and I think maybe you were edging at it when you said Mr. Caraway's name, how locally could we make our teens, like our seniors, more involved in this process?
So, at a very local level, like the talks I have with Mr. Caraway are about distributing my website to, say, just Burbank students, because I'm in talks to have it in the PLS, so the government class, just talking with Ms. Smith, who's the PLS teacher, professor, about adding it to the website, maybe have her put, or her PLS Canvas board, add it to, have her put a post on about it when we cover like the voting module. But locally, distributing it through BRVGS would be, that would help locally. The biggest issue is that when you're targeting voting in high school, you're really only targeting a certain percentage of seniors. Because you have to be 18 to vote, and not all seniors are 18. I don't recall if Virginia has voter pre-registration, which is where you can register to vote when you're under 18. If that were the case, you could target more local high schools, pre-register to vote. But targeting high schools, when you're trying to get them to register to vote, you have a very narrow demographic you can target, which makes it somewhat difficult.
How would you have approached your senior project if this past year wasn't an election year, like a presidential election?
So, a lot of my research would have been the same. My internship, I probably would have tried to work with the office of a local politician, maybe mayor's office or something. I could have done that this year too. Again, that's something I wish I would have done. But for my community service would have been the biggest change, where I volunteered as a page. That only happens for general elections, at least every 4 years. I might have looked for an off-year election if it was 2018, like a midterm. If that wasn't the case, then I probably would have tried to do community service related to just voter knowledge through like just distributing information, things like that.
Anybody else? Questions? All right. Thank you very much. Take care, man. All right, folks, so we're down to our last presenter for the day. Go ahead and give a round of applause to Ms. So Ari is here today to present about, and this has been a common topic, I think, for most of us today, about inequities and inequalities. And she's going to do it from the perspective of digital media and access to digital media. All right, so go ahead and give her your attention. I'm going to hand things over, and we'll see what she's got to say.
Hi everyone, my name is AMosqueda. I'm a senior at William Monroe High School and I've been with BRVGS for 4 years. And like Mr. Patterson said, my overall topic was digital media, its importance, its role in our everyday lives, as well as the inequities that stem from its use. So that's me 10 years ago, 7 years old. I was about to film a random video on the iPod Nano I had just gotten. And this was actually the beginning of my interest in digital media. I would create random videos, just creating content and combining my creativity with the use of technology. And then this is me 10 years later, still very interested in making videos and combining technology with various art forms such as dance, which is one of my hobbies and is what I'm doing up here. And now, I was especially interested in digital inequities, digital media inequities, because the coronavirus pandemic has highlighted these inequities, especially last year when school shut down last March, and also throughout this school year, where not every student was able to transition easily into online school, either due to a lack of access to a device or internet, or lack of previous experience with consistent online learning. And I'm very grateful to have had previous experience through BRVGS and through the high school, but many students likely did not feel as prepared. And so that's why I wanted to go into this. And this difference between me and many students is just one example of how digital media inequities can cause disparities amongst a group of people and create a sort of gap between those who can access technology and those who cannot. So that led me to my research question, which was how can we address the inequities that are presented in digital media access? And to begin, I had to look at what causes these inequities, what's behind the inequities that we see across generations, across the United States, and across the world. So what I found in my research was that there were many different factors that were also very systemic. One of these was generational differences. So according to a study done by Oxford University based on a survey, only 4.9% of those older than 85 use the internet regularly. And with every group of people 5 years younger, this percentage doubles. So there's a huge generational gap of internet use. And another factor that affects digital media inequity is education level and income level. Because the higher your income, the more likely you are to have an education, the more likely you are to have the financial resources to access a device and the internet, and therefore be more familiar with navigating technology and the media. And all of these contribute to the digital divide, which is the gap between those who are able to benefit from technology and those who are not able to benefit from technology. And because there are so many different things that go into the inequity, which are often systemic, like education level and income level, it was very difficult to see what the solutions could be. But I found that because the issues were so multifaceted, the solution would have to be multifaceted as well. And in my research, I said that my proposed solutions are to increase public access to technology, increase digital literacy in public education, as well as increase diversity in user interface and user experience, which was something new that I learned from my research. So user interface and user experience is basically taking a user's perspective when creating media. So for example, a website. Someone in this field would make sure a website's easy to use, efficient, and overall just studies how the user interacts with this data. And I actually learned this from my expert interview with Jess Agüero. She's a UI/UX designer who told me about the importance of diversity in these companies that create media and technology. And she said, a technology is often reflective of the people who make it. So if the group of people that is making this technology is not diverse, then their content, their creation is not going to cater to a diverse audience, such as those who are very familiar with technology and those who aren't. And so this leads me to my internship in computer science. So for the first part of my internship, it was the leadership seminars with Mr. Carraway, where we had various discussions about what it means to be a leader, how to use your strengths and weaknesses to your advantage in leadership, as well as how to overall become a better leader. And just like Keegan and Hannah, I read Quiet, The Power of Introverts in a World That Can't Stop Talking. And in this book, as well as all of the workshops, it opened my eyes to the fact that there's not one correct way of being a leader. I used to think that being a more shy person and a quiet person would be a barrier to being a leader, but really there's a positive in that too, because as a quiet person, I tend to listen more, which is also an important quality in leaders. And for my other part of my internship, I interned with Zoe Ogilvy and Riley Brooks. Unfortunately, I do not have a picture of Riley to show, but this was through Ashoka, a nonprofit organization that uplifts young social entrepreneurs through telling their stories. And I was actually in the middle of looking for an internship when Mr. Caraway sent out the information for this, but I found it to be very exciting to me because it involved creativity, flexibility, and teamwork. And so my first task was to, and this is what I did throughout the internship, was to write articles about young leaders who are making changes in their community. And this one was about Daniel, who was a young leader in Nigeria, breaking barriers for youth access to education. And writing this was really inspiring because he's such a young person like me, but he has such a passion for helping those around him. But it was also difficult because I had never written in this style, which is formal but also creative storytelling. And so that was a learning experience for me. I felt like an online journalist or something. But fortunately, I had a team to work with. There's my mentor up in the upper left, and then these are my fellow interns at Ashoka. We would proofread each other's work and also meet each week to tell each other what we were working on and keep each other focused as well. I could also see the connections between all of our projects, which was cool to see. And then my community internship, or my community service, was actually intertwined with my work at Ashoka because my mentor said that I could do that. And what I did for this was I interviewed a new Ashoka fellow. Her name is Tapiso, and she's from South Africa with a youth development program in her area to increase the amount of youth who are obtaining a higher education. She saw the struggles that she faced, and she wanted other youth to be able to overcome these struggles. And what I did was interview her and write an article to expand the outreach of her program and her impact. So the interview I had with her was actually the first interview I had for this whole project. So I was really nervous at first, but then it was really like a natural conversation, and I was expecting it to be more like question, answer, but it wasn't like that. And so overcoming that initial anxiety was really helpful, especially when I would later do my expert interview, which I mentioned previously. And my legacy project. So at the beginning, I wanted to do a podcast with my mentor, Riley, but due to practical difficulties, we couldn't do that, and we had to come up with another thing to do. So we thought of virtual conversations, which are very, prevalent right now, especially because of COVID. But what we wanted to do was create virtual conversations about issues relevant to today, such as racism, social change, and COVID-19. So I researched a little bit about what appeals to young people, because this virtual conversation would be catered to young people. And using my own perspective, I thought about these issues and I brought them up with her. And so I worked after various meetings with my mentor, Riley, as well as another intern, Luisa. We talked about what these virtual conversations would look like, what platforms are more engaging, and just how to cater and advertise to a youth audience to engage in these conversations. And Riley was able to pitch our ideas to Ashoka, and they accepted them as a part of the 2020 Ashoka Virtual Summit, which was a group of, it was a bunch of events with youth or young leaders speaking about these issues, about racism, social change, community response to COVID-19, as well as mental health around COVID-19. And one of the events that I attended was my favorite one. It was called The New Way Forward, how young change makers are leading a new normal. And essentially it was a talk about how even during the COVID-19 pandemic, young leaders have persevered and made change in their communities. And I wanted to, as an extension of the project, create a final piece for Ashoka, a final article to show this conversation. And so I worked with another BRVGS intern, Kylie, to create this piece, which we wanted to be like a unique form of digital media. So what we did was we created an article that had clips from the conversation, as well as key takeaways from the young leaders that discussed what they spoke out about. And we created that, and by creating this, we hope to, it's not published on the Ashoka website yet, but it will be, and it will show the importance of making change in your community to young leaders at Ashoka, young fellows at Ashoka, as well as increase or contribute to the increase of unique digital media that's more accessible to others, because articles sometimes can be lengthy and hard to read, but having clips, audio, visual pieces helps to engage more people. And that is my conclusion. So if I were to do something differently, I think I would start earlier, probably at the end of junior year or at the beginning of summer, because it was hard to manage all your other senior tasks as well as this project. Yeah. And my advice for future BRVGS students is to start early, but also to look for an internship and a topic that you're interested about. But then also, if you find out that you're not as interested in that topic as you initially thought, to not worry too much either, because even if that happens, you still learn something. You still learn that perhaps that's not something you want to go into in the future. So no matter what, it will still be a learning experience. And my future plans are to go to Swarthmore College and study film and media studies and possibly minor in dance. Now, I'm kind of indecisive, so I might change that, but we'll see. And yeah, I want to thank everyone for listening. My mentors, Mr. Carraway, Zoe, Riley, for allowing this to happen, as well as Mr. Patterson, my classmates, and all of the staff at BRVGS for being very encouraging throughout the year. Thank you.
Open the floor to questions.
Yeah.
How would you say the pandemic has affected the digital divide?
I think that because of the pandemic, even access to technology has decreased, because usually schools provide that for students, like a computer lab and the library, which was closed temporarily. So I think it has increased the digital divide, especially among younger people who may not have access to that at home.
I'm going to piggyback on that. Do you think, though, that COVID could actually then have helped the digital divide if we go fast forward 5-10 years? Because just even in our district, we've purchased a lot more technology in the past 12 months than we ever have. Do you see that as, could there be a bonus out of it in the future?
Yeah, I do think so, because now that the pandemic occurred, a lot of things turn to technology. So we have to be more aware of how technology does affect your education. And here at the high school, we provide Chromebooks, which is a great feature of the high school. And so I do think there is a positive, because now everyone's aware of the technology and how important it is.
Are you going to still work with Ashoka after this? You made it sound like you're kind of wrapping it up, but you also seem like you enjoy being involved in it.
Oh, yeah. So they offered me an extension of the internship for the summer, but unfortunately I'm not able to do that. I wanted to at first, but I do hope to work with them in the future, because they did say that I should continue to see them as an ally for an internship.
Yeah, Ari, that was our first time out with doing, working with Ashoka, and, Zoe, as you know, is a Blue Ridge grad, so that was great that they did the outreach with us, but I haven't heard a lot about, I kind of knew what you guys were doing with that, I hadn't heard a lot about it, this is the most detailed. Will we be able to get access to the things that you've written and this thing that you're producing with Kylie and be able to link to that?
Yeah, I think so. So the other articles that I've written are up on there. I don't have a link, but I can send those.
But can we find them, we'll know which ones are yours?
If you look up Ashoka Ariana Mosqueda, I think so, yeah.
Okay.
Anybody else? All right.
All right, folks, so that does conclude our presentations for today. Before we wrap up and say goodbye, I would like to mention, don't forget that we are going to have a quick senior meeting on the